Hello, everybody, and welcome to another PmP end of month review. Here we are. Summer is officially upon us. It's June. It's sunny, it's warm, and we're all outside wearing shorts, and certainly not a bunch of indoor kid nerds sitting in our basement painting. Oh, wait, that's exactly what we're doing, and that's exactly where we want to be, staying away from the harmful rays of the sun down here. So I am joined this month again by Mr. Stone Monk. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great. Spring is here, which means it's not cold. It's not cold in our basements.
Sure. Yeah. You're a little more north. I imagine you have a longer winter there.
Yeah.
You get like 1 month of summer for 2 weeks in July. That's nice. You got that going for you.
It's hot and muggy though, so you don't want more than a month.
That's a fair point.
The spring and the fall is a sweet spot in Wisconsin.
Gotcha.
How are you doing?
I'm good, man. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to review the the monthly end of month submissions to the PmP end of month review event. What is the PmP? Why, that is the Painters Motivating Painters, our hobby focused Facebook group, wherein we are trying to help you take your next step on your hobby journey. Of course, all people of all skill levels are welcome. Everybody has a next step in their own journey. And what we allow our members to do is we have an event every month. I'll flip over in just a moment and show you how to get to it. And everybody can put one submission per month if you want into that for critique and feedback. We ask that it's finished work, and we ask that it's you direct us in the post as to what you're looking for. Don't just throw something in there and say, here's the thing. Say what you want us to critique. Help us help you, basically. So one submission per person, and and you don't have to. You don't have to put anything in there. You're more than welcome to just post in the open area of the group. And that then leads me to my next point, which is we do this once a month, and we certainly have a good time doing it. But the real heroes are the people who are interacting, giving positive feedback, and helping out when questions are asked in every post that goes up in the community every day. So please keep up that positive interaction. We want this community to be one where we all support each other constantly. So thank you for those who are doing that. And please keep up that good work, because it's just better if someone is helping and there and answering questions. And obviously Eric and I can't do all that. And I am so thankful for all of our very active and positive members who give so much great feedback every month. So with that, Eric, are you ready? You ready to jump in and start the review?
What are we doing tonight? Yes, I am absolutely ready.
Rock on. Let me lock on me. We'll go ahead and share up here. So let's say you're in the PmP here where I am. And by the way, if people who maybe you're asking to join and I haven't approved you yet, you have to answer the questions. If you don't answer the questions, I'm not approving you. I don't care how many groups you're in. I don't care if you're my mother or father. You're not getting in here unless you answer the questions. All right. So just so you know. But you can come in here and you'll notice at the top post, you'll see an event that says May review submissions. Sometimes this goes away, and that's okay. You can always just come over here to events and still access it. In this case, I'll just go ahead and click here. And once you're in the event, of course, you can then post a new you can make a new post here, just like I could. You can write something and add photos. And that's exactly what our members have done here, that they have created their posts and added some specific questions, and we're going to get into it. So we begin with Callum, and Callum says this is the start of his Fire Slayers he's doing for his local store, and wondering what we thought about the paint scheme. He's looking for an oceanic water theme. Great. I dig this idea. I like non-standard paint schemes for these dudes. So does the paint scheme work? Yeah, I think it absolutely does. You've moved so you have a sort of green-red, compositional contrasting colors here, complementary colors, whatever you want to say. And, but of course, we've moved it slightly into orange, and so you moved your green slightly into teal, which then gives you a red orange and a green blue, which keeps them, you're rotating around the color wheel. So I think that's exactly correct. So as far as like from a composition perspective, yes, I think it 100% works. I think it gives that feeling. See if it'll load up the next picture here. You can do it, Facebook. Nope. Okay. That's fine. Maybe I can go backwards. Nope. This is it. This is the photo we get because Facebook says I can't do the next one. And that's okay. Because this will let me give the feedback I need. So I think you're compositionally strong. I think it might be cool if maybe you took a braid or two of this and made it the same green. Like you could leave the black. Maybe you could just do 2 braids or something in this same turquoise. That could look really cool. Just to kind of help balance it out from the front of the model. It is on the back. It's much more balanced because of the nature of these extra bits you can see. So just a thought there. One other note I want to say on weathering very quickly. You have the sword rusted out, which I appreciate. You're trying to balance your orange across the model. Good instinct. The problem is that this sword would only be rusted like this if he had literally never stabbed anybody with it. Because this orange rust is very flaky and would get knocked off the second he rammed this into somebody's armor or skin or bone or whatever. If you want to use rust like this on a blade, the good way to do it is to keep the end of the sword cleaner, because he's going to tend to put the pokey bit here into his enemies, and almost think of it like the center part here. This ends up collecting the rust. So you kind of run a light brown and then a darker brown, and then you have some rust speckling, and then you have the orange gather mainly here in the center and along the center line where the edge would be. Then the cutting edge stays clean, and the top of it stays cleaner, and that will look, kind of more like an active, but somehow rusting. I assume because of the water. They live near the ocean, so salt rusts metal very quickly. So that all checks out. It just that'd be a good way to do that. All right. So there you go. Cool submission, Callum. I dig it. I very much like the color scheme and think it absolutely works. All right. Next up, Daniel and an orc with a bow.
So Daniel's coming back to painting after 20 years. He recently, I think just this month, posted this orc in just in the page, getting feedback for critique in the CNC, and got some feedback and then put some more time into it before submitting it for this, which is a fantastic use of this community. And he said that his main comment is that he was able to take the contrast in the skin much higher than he expected he could. The group here is just really great at articulating some of these techniques and ways, identifying kind of ways to push wherever you are at paint-wise. This group can zero in on helping you. And you have done a great job of pushing contrast in this model. It's very easy to see at a glance that you've got really dark hues of green up to really light hues of green, and you've put them in really appropriate places. The top of the muscles, you've zeroed it in on that face. I look at this model and I go directly to that face because you've got quite a bit of lightness there, and that's fantastic. This is also, I think, so this is his first custom base, which I think is also pretty cool that he's up on this rock. Whether you've sculpted this yourself or found some pieces and put it together, it's really cool. And so his question is, how do I put more contrast? How do I push it further? And I think when it comes to, you've done a great job. If we go to the next image, I believe we'll get a look at the back and his shoulders. On this right-hand shoulder, I think everyone will see probably the best example of what Daniel's able to achieve. And right under there at the bottom, let's look at the bottom of the shoulder, and you look at underneath the forearm and elbow, and then up underneath the hand, you've almost just you've got your darkest color there, and you've left it kind of alone. You've not tried to highlight in that spot. I think that's great. You don't need to highlight all those things. There are such things as reflective light that could be placed in there, but we're not going to worry about that because tabletop, that sort of stuff, this next step is, how do I push this further? And now on the shoulder is a great example where you went dark on the darkest on the bottom, you went to a mid-tone up to a third, a higher tone, and then a highlight. And the shoulders fantastic on most models for that because you've got a lot of space to do it. And so you can get all of those transitions. The challenge for you next is to keep working on this, blending between 3 colors, 4 colors, whatever it is. I tend to blend between 2 colors, the darkest color and the brightest color, and I try and do wet blending to meet in the middle, and you get kind of that gradation. But on the even though that shoulder is really big, you do have room on, say, the forearm. So where you've got your darkest color by the elbow, you can have those same 4 colors or the next 3 colors progress all the way up to his wrist. So it's working on trying to get some of those same gradations in smaller and smaller locations. Check out that rhyme. So it's just trying to find, so for instance, on his other arm, we don't see as much dark or mid-tone, whereas, that the lower part of the arm could probably be much more of that second dark tone rather than kind of the second light tone. I think you've got great gradation on the leather armor on that back. Well, I'm not certain whether that's the light or whether you've painted it darker. It does look like you're using 3 browns. So all of that is really good. So red is one where your red gherkin dress skirt doesn't quite have those same gradations, and red is actually a really fun color to get those different tones in because there's a lot of different ways you can go with it. So I think you've done a great job of submitting to this group, getting the feedback you were looking for, and practicing taking advantage of that. Keep working on that exact same tip over and over and over in smaller spaces, and you'll get where you're looking to go.
Absolutely. All right. Next up, we have Jeffrey Bryant, who brings us his Daughters of Khaine from the realm of Gyran, I think is what he said. Yeah, Gyran, with the realm of life. Okay, so he's got a goal here, basically to paint an AOS army in 6 months, which you picked a nice tough one in the Daughters. So this is a tough army to paint. He wanted his own color scheme, and he wants basically a good, tabletop or slightly above tabletop quality, great from 3 feet and good from 12 inches. Sounds like an excellent goal. What I love about this is he has clear, defined goals and a quality level he's aiming for. I wish more people would think like this when they start their army, because it really helps you set the tone.
Yep.
So it's exactly the way to build an army. Know where you're going to go. You won't be disappointed when you achieve it. Mission accomplished, and you're happy. Okay, so he said he's basically looking for all CNC. He knows the weapons need to be brought up a notch, and the flesh is flatter than it should be. Okay, cool. Well, I suspect you're already feeling like you know what's going on. So I'll give you some quick thoughts here and kind of, we'll just touch on some stuff because I think you hit my main 2 items. Also, A+ on this like photo collage you've given us. My God, this is beautiful. Anyway, first of all, do they live in Gyran? Heck yeah, they do. You captured it without making them feel like naturey. That is to say, they don't feel like they're Sylvaneth or something, right? You have a slight blue-green tone to the leather. The green is a wonderful choice here, just on things like the bikini top, the shoulder pads, the flags, all that kind of stuff. The knives going into the yellow spectrum is an excellent choice. All of that works. Your basing is also very good. I like the flowers. I like all the different stuff going on. Very naturey. Choosing a sort of brick red for the little things they're jumping off of is good because it makes it feel more natural than if you had painted them as stone or metal. That's a small choice, but a very strong choice. It shows you're thinking. I like it. The brown hair is also a very good choice because just it's not pink or green, big green. It would be over the top. It's not pink or some electric color. It's feels very realistic. So all that's aces. Now let's get in here because this will really kind of show off what we're looking at. So the first thing I would say is I would also push the hair up a little more in some places, specifically here and here at these tips. You can push it into a little bit higher highlight. You're going the right direction here, almost adding in like an ochre color, a lighter brown. I think you can push that even a little farther on some of the strands just to really add some highlight here. Brown hair, even brown hair like this will tend to get pretty, will have like blondish elements in it. Beyond that, I think the things you said are quite literally the exact two things I will tell you need to work on, which is the flesh and the daggers. Your head's in the right spot. Having painted a fair number of these little knives, I'm familiar enough with them. They give you, like, I like this green. Just work some darker green shadows in here oppositely, and I think you're good to go. So what I mean by that is, like, let's push a dark green shadow up into here, and then maybe down here and down here. So there's almost like an NMM-ish transition in them. Don't get scared by that. It just, you know, you're creating that kind of transition. I think that'll make them a lot more lively. So I think that's good. And then, yeah, the flesh needs some work. We need to add some more colors in here, some more reds, purples, that kind of thing. I would especially focus on, like, on models like this, for example. Let's just take her, and I'll use her as an example. Here in her abs, under her arms, within the edges of the muscle structure and the joints, around the bottom of the hand where it goes into the bracelets, up under her bum and the bottom of her leg. And then, of course, within the face, the most important part. Having the lips called out would be good. Even a subtle red, you know, she doesn't need to be crazy wearing lipstick, though you can. You know, if these girls are often portrayed wearing pretty extreme makeup, so you could go with just minor makeup and it would still feel more naturalistic, but apropos. But some blush and red into the cheeks, some red into the lips, some red here into the side of the nose and above the eye. I will say that a fun thing you could do here, if you wanted to get a little fantasy and a little crazy, give them green eyeshadow. I think that would pop, like make it the same as the blades. Use the yellow green. And so what you want to do here is you take a deeper green, let's say like this. We do the eyeshadow layer. We just go zwip, zwip, and kind of lay it up here. What's beautiful about these models is this eye ridge is modeled very accurately in that the ridge above the eyeball is slightly raised. So you can then take the more yellow green and you kind of touch just right here, just above the eye. And what you'll get is this awesome transition that looks just fantastic. I've painted this face many times and used tons of different eyeshadow colors. Just a simple double transition like that will really bring them to life. So that could be a cool thing you could try. Makes them feel a little bit more fantastical and murder culty, even in the plane of life. And it could be, it'll be a real nice, like, pop element to them, right? So they'll still feel quite naturalistic, but still also very dark. Just a thought. All in all, I think these look great. And, you know, your head is in exactly the right place. I think this is wonderful for your goals. You're in exactly the right place. And I think you absolutely have met the looks good from 12 inches. I to be completely honest, you look good closer than that. Okay. Like at this, which is basically an inch or closer. I mean, she's huge, right? I think she still looks good. So you're doing a great job.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Marshall
has been painting for a month.
Okay.
And it's looking fantastic. The main thing to affirm is you've got fantastic blocking. You're keeping your paint colors where they need to go, and they're not spilling over. You're not. You've even managed to get the runes popped out, etc. So fantastic work there. He's next thing I'll touch on. You know, he's like, I want to get done with this model. I think I don't know if it was nerves or just looking to keep moving. He's got a whole box to do, and he wants to use our feedback to kind of how he's going to apply that to the rest of the box, which is, again, a really great way to use this community. So next thing is the basing. Now, at first glance, I saw it and I was like, oh, it's flat. It's just got a couple rocks on it. And the thing that you're doing really well that I like is that flat space isn't just one blank color with a wash on it. You've got some really great variation. There's spots that look a little more sulfury, or like they've got some phosphorus in it. Other spots that are a little more dry, and I will say those particular rocks don't necessarily feel like they're part of that same sand, which isn't necessary. But maybe some of that same yellow color gets used on top of those, so that it looks like it's mixed in, or the dust has covered them a bit. You could try and grab some foliage. There's a lot of good, stuff like that could work into there. But otherwise, where I might typically suggest other kinds of some grit or sand or that sort of thing, I don't really think you need it because it's its own kind of thing. It's kind of just this very flat, almost sandy space, and you've done a great job of giving it variation, especially next to the model itself. So working in some of those oranges and yellows. The model, like I said, is blocked very well. I like your use of blue in a few key spots. If we go to the next space, we've got, you can see it on the beard or the braids. Go one more, and we've got it on the shield. We got it on the axe. So great use of that pop color. The orange again in the beard and the mohawk, etc. Everything's looking great. And so he's asking, no, how do I push it a little further? What do I do with this, and where do I go? And I really think you did a great job shading this, and I can see the skin does have variation. The skin does have some darkness in the recesses, and skin isn't going to always have, especially these guys where they're, how I put it, they're not ripped, right? They've got soft musculature. They're not going to have super deep gradations. However, I think what you could use in both the blues and in the skin tones is just another level of highlight. Again, you've been doing this for 30 days, and what you've accomplished is fantastic. If you were to go through your entire box of these guys and get it to the standard, that would be a fantastic achievement for someone who's been painting for 30 days. So, so you've already reached a really fantastic spot for what you're for your experience level. So for highlighting, this could be a line highlight. So that means that you could take a lighter color of the light flesh tone and create a line at the topmost part of those muscles using a very thin brush, or it could be on the shield. Similarly, you grab the edges and you're putting a little bit of a line of the lighter, or it could be you've been doing this 30 days, so I don't want to be throwing blending at you, but even if you took that lighter color and you stipple. So stippling is a technique where you take a brush that maybe has a pretty short set of bristles and they're kind of stiff, and you kind of treat it like a dry brush where you dip the tip in some paint, brush off quite a bit of it, and just in the raised areas you could stipple in some lighter color, and then I cheat sometimes when I do that, and I run my thumb over it to blur it or blend it. So that could be something you could do to add some high points in the blue and high points on the skin with lighter colors. The last tip I'll give you is go thinner on the paints with the mohawk. If we go back to the left on the first picture, or maybe it's the second picture actually, right here, I can see where it looks like the paint is kind of webbing in between. I have not painted these sculpts personally, so I don't know if that exists on the model itself. But as much as you can do as little of paint as possible on these, which may be hard because it's orange and the orange takes a number of layers to cover it, but as much as you can keep that thin so that it doesn't kind of fill in the gaps and you keep those individual strands, that would be good. So those are my thoughts. Nice job on 30 days.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. I mean, anytime you're producing that a month in, you should feel pretty good about yourself. So it's and it is a journey. You're never going to be an absolute master at the first one, but I'm glad to see that 30 days in, you're willing to post and get feedback. That right there, that instinct says that you're ahead of the curve and on the right path, because feedback is what helps you grow and take your next step. So well done. All right. Well, let's keep looking. Next up, let's see. How about I take the tank? Would you rather? Well, let me ask this way: would you rather have the tank or the Terminator?
The Terminator, probably. I'm at a loss for the tank.
Okay, sounds good. I'll take the tank. So Alexander, aka Fulcrum. Hey, Fulcrum, how you doing, buddy? I read this, so he's looking for. This is basically a 15 mil tank, and he's looking for some general feedback on the weathering and these kinds of elements. 15 mil is a tough scale. It's small. Like this guy is pretty. I mean, it's tank. It's big. It's a bigger piece in there, but it's kind of itty bitty because all tanks or all 15 mil is itty bitty. But yeah, general thoughts. It's good. Let's talk about the things I like. camo works at this scale. I think that's perfectly great. Your like decal work here is good. The antenna you mentioned, you added in the comments, I think those sell. You want to make sure they're really nice and straight. You may want to vary the height a little more. Like, I don't know. I don't know enough about the tank historically to know if those little antenna were actually supposed to be the same size or if they're different. I'll say like aesthetically, it'll sell more if they're kind of different sized. The weathering elements and stuff like that, this down here, I think all that looks really nice. I like the kicked up dirt and splotches and stuff. I think that's really solid. The biggest thing that I noticed was sort of how easy you're going to be able to sell this on a scale like this. I don't know. You could do a little more streaking. Like there's some tiny amounts I can see in here. You could push that streaking a little more. Tanks, especially because they sit like this almost all the time. The interesting thing about tanks is they combine two interesting elements where they never change position, or at least relatively rarely do they change position vis-a-vis the sky, i.e. they might go slightly up or down a hill, but for the most part, they sit flat on the ground in this way. And they have perpendicular flats to the sky, right? Or to the ground. And what this means is that streaking is very common. So you could try to push that a little more. I see like there's some in here. It's good. You could push a little more. I don't know. The really big element that jumps out at me that I think you could do would be more dirt and stuff in the treads, especially down very deep in, and here in the wheels, again, deep in, right? This thing moves and drives, so it's going to knock dirt off some of the elements unless it's literally driving through mud. But a little bit heavier pigmenting and mud texture, especially in between the treads and here, like in the wheels, where think inside here where the dirt would gather and not come out, here around rivets, here in these cracks, the kind of places where dirt's going to get in and get stuck and not get knocked off simply by this thing driving around, right? So that's probably the biggest thing I noted. But yeah, all in all, I think this is great. I mean, at 15 mil, I think you're in exactly the right area of detail here. So good stuff. Okay. Fred brings us a Deathwing Terminator.
Yeah, so Fred had, I don't know if this is his first and also kind of prepping to do a unit of these, and took some advice from some previous posts, etc. Went with a cool gray. Also had, experimenting with some water products. I think he used the AK interactive swamp gel, and wasn't sure there's a waviness to it, etc., that he wasn't sure about. In terms of, so looking at the higher contrast white, and going with a blue white on this one. I think overall this contrast in white is done very well. And choosing, whether you go warm white or cool white, making that choice, sticking with it, and pushing through is, I think it's fantastic work. There's a lot of really good balancing out with kind of the red flowers, the red chain axe, the red twin bolter, a lot of those other things. So really good work there. The blue on the kind of wing on his shoulder and the blue on his chest, the Aquila or whatever, those look like they're two different shades, which maybe they'd want to, since that one in the middle has that green tone, you may want to find a couple other places where that particular jade fits. So that wing on his shoulder could be one. The lens, I can't tell if it looks like his eyes might be that same color, and maybe there's something on the ground that could be that as well. If we go, so this straight on pick, we show some gel, that gel off to the right hand side. I'm not seeing it in the middle, so you can see a bunch of that gel there. I'm not certain. It looks like that was kind of a hard, given this kind of rock and that sort of stuff. If you taped this up to kind of let the water fill a space, maybe they're just, because of the rock, there wasn't a really easy place for that to go. I'm not certain. I've not used that material before. I think looking all around this model, you do a great job of putting this blue kind of in the shadow or the kind kind of under the bottom portion of a shape. The one place where maybe that isn't the case is this left leg that you're showing us. I think if in this case you would want to have that blue to the left side, to the front of this leg underneath the knee, and have it move to white towards the right side or outside of this material or this legging. I think that was the only place around the model where the kind of rule felt like it broke for me, that the blue was in the recess rather than just at the bottom of a shape, or the lower part of a shape. So that would be one thought I had. But otherwise, I think a great execution on this cool white. The basing, just I think, not being able to really give you feedback on the gel. I think you do a great job of creating some really interesting and realistic tones with that rock, with the foliage, etc. And I think this is going to look like a really great unit once you kind of carry these elements over to the rest of the models.
Right on. Okay. Let's see. Tell you what, I had already looked at these. How about if you want to keep rolling, if you want to take William Charles's Goblin, I guess he is, because I really want to talk about Joe's Viking here. This guy looks like the dude from the Viking show. He really does. I don't know if that's what he's meant to be, but he looks like that guy.
Yeah, he does. Let's see. I'm just going to read it really quick. So he's partially trying to just practice some photography in addition to, kind of working this up for some of his own collection. Let's see. And to kind of start off with, the photography looks great. I'm sure that the red background helps this one in particular because of the green tones, and those being complementary. That's going to help the green kind of be more green. But the red is a little distracting in that it's a very powerful color. I think you probably want to do photographs on something more muted and that kind of fades away unless the model pop on its own or be the central focus. That being said, I do think you've achieved good photography, because if I'm able to force myself to push out the reds, the greens, I'm seeing really good contrast. I'm seeing the lights and the darks. I'm seeing, the detail on the fur. I'm seeing the work you did on the blue cloth. And all around, I feel like I am seeing what you've done on the model, which is very successful. Let's see. Army Painter, Goblin Green, Vallejo Black, Green Ink, built up from Goblin Green through Jungle Green. Yeah, I mean, I think all in all, you're using a lot of good colors. You're doing great contrast throughout. The one place that maybe falls a little bit more flat is the wooden pole, and the blade at the top of it. Adding a little bit more intentional kind of metallic highlight on the blade, and then maybe some scratches or dings and cuts and or striations or wood grain in the pole would help that as well. And also in the cowhide shield, put some variation in those spots. So go with a darker brown in the middle of the spot and work your way out to just kind of create some more variation there. And the wooden framing of the shield could also use some shading, make it darker down below underneath, and then or add some striations and chipping and cutting like you would see on the stick as well. But all in all, grid photography on a fun model that's painted really well with good contrast, and you're hitting your tabletop standard very well and then some. So thanks for posting this, and more good photography lessons from everybody else.
Right on. Okay, so Joe says this is his sort of first passion project, and he wanted to do something dramatic with spare minis and bits and so on and so forth. And basically, he's looking to take a sort of next step as a painter, but he really wants to talk about the face. And I was interested in this for so many reasons, because I saw, it's a custom created scene sort of this, as you mentioned, a passion project. And there's a lot of things in here I like that I want to highlight. So first off, it's pretty great. That is to say, I like the icy waves and that kind of stuff. It's a very convincing scene as to how it's set up. So I want to talk about this shot because this one will really set up everything I need. Our lighting, by the way, here. So Joe, first things first, we got to talk about taking pictures. Go back and look at the last thing we just did and look at the difference between how you're lit and how well our previous submitter was lit, right? And that's the problem. Like, you're way overexposed here with a direct light, a bulb here shining directly without interference, and it's casting some bad light. So you want to make sure when you're taking pictures, you have a lot more even, diffuse lighting. It's hard. I hate lighting. It always bothers me, but there we go. I'm going to start from the bottom up. Water and this froth looks really nice. It's maybe a bit too frothy. Like that's a lot of froth, almost looking like snow coming up. And I don't think that's actually what you're aiming for. I don't think it's supposed to have moved up and this is ice. If it is supposed to be ice, then this all should be snow too back here. So I think this is just meant to be froth. So you want to wheel it back just a little. The color on the water looks really good. Bridge looks nice and weathered. With the tufts, as I've said before many times, whenever you're using tufts, you got to do something with them. You just stuck down tufts here. Tufts need to be painted. Take wash, agrax, something like that. Get a brush with a good sized belly and start stabbing into the center of this thing and on the dirt around it to make it feel like it's part of the earth. Get a nice dark center here. Get that wash in there. That'll make it feel like it belongs. Then take a nice dry brush of some ivory or something and go right across the top. Those two quick little things, and your tufts will suddenly look like they're actually part of the living scene. Now, next up, I like the texture on the blue. I think that's fine. You could push a little farther with some more hashing and stuff to get that kind of feel of wool. So, you could push your stippling even a little farther, but I see what you're doing and I like it. The leather needs a little more life especially up in here. This is quite flat. So we need to do some more with this. Scratches, hashes, chunks, highlights, color transitions. Give me something. Because this is very flat. More like you did with the arm. Like, these armbands look nice because you got little edges and stuff. It's good. And then finally the face. Yeah, I mean, what you need with the face is more color, right? All in all, his face is it's overexposed. So again, it's a little tough for me to tell exactly, but I need more color in it. If this is cool or cold, which is also kind of what I get from the scene, this water does seem frothy, but still chilled. He's got that Viking look. So in my head, it's cold water. That actually makes your skin look more red because your body rushes blood to the surface to try to warm you, right? Hence you get rosier cheeks and redder noses and stuff like that. But working in a more yellow tone up here, blue down here, under the shadow, and then red here and the side of the nose, maybe some red here in the cheeks, maybe a little red even in the forehead because it is a little cold. But you could go a lot of different ways with colors, but your main challenge with the face is I need more. I need more tones throughout, especially here on the side of his head. Like, I assume he's not actually bald like this. So this should have some kind of hint of difference of hair color where he shaved it. So you want to take some glazes or something of, could be brown, could be even a null oil or something. Like, there's a lot you can use black because almost any hair when shaved down actually looks quite dark when it's just the shaved head thing. So you could add, you literally just glaze in a null oil in a controlled fashion. I can see it right back there. So you've got it. And that'll give the impression, like, if you're careful and you make it a line basically like this, it'll look like he actually shaved his head. So those would be my first critiques for you. Hopefully that helps. It's a really cool thing you built, and I dig the passion of it. I think it's awesome. I think it narratively sells. We just need to take that up to the next level there. All right. Next up, we've got the Starstrider kill team, and Greg brings us this big old boy. Which one would you like? Do you want this general guy? I want to call him Volturnus, but that's the named character. It's not do you want to do not Volturnus, or do you want to do the Starstrider kill team? What are you feeling there, Eric? Are you on mute right now? Are you still there? Did I lose you?
I'll do the kill team.
Okay, so I'll keep talking. Right on. All right. I like that he said Greg. Good. Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Greg. And he said he used some airbrush for blends. So there's a couple different questions Greg wanted to unpack here. One, how do you get the metallic look in scales? Two, when you're using your airbrush, how do you handle spaces like the tails? That kind of thing. So first of all, kudos to you for getting the airbrush in there at a later stage. More people need to do this. The airbrush should be a tool just like anything else you can interchange back and forth. Where it's really selling is around this thing. I love what you did there. That looks really nice around this big, like, I don't know, back head thing. Whatever this thing is, I don't know. Good stuff. The skin on the beast could use a little bit more in some places, especially here, kind of up in the arm where we transition into the scales. You got to like it like here. More of this red tone I would love to see up here as well. When you've got these over lippy, lappy tails, yeah, my answer is silly putty. Just get yourself a thing of silly putty. You can get it at the dollar store, order it off Amazon for like, again, $1, a couple bucks. And what you want to do is if you're using your airbrush in a space where things are flippy floppy, crissy crossy, you just silly putty over the thing behind it and spray the thing you want to spray. Then take the silly putty off, put it on the other thing, spray this. It's really easy. Silly putty won't pull up paint. You can slap it on there in like 2 seconds. It's the way to go. So that would be my advice on that. Now, I want to talk about the cloak for a minute because you smoothed it out, but I actually think the cloak needs to go farther. It feels a little flat. Some nice darker shadows here, and here is actually what I think we need. I don't really need to highlight higher, but I need deeper tones in here. One of the things that I like to tell people to do is take a picture of your thing and then set it to black and white, and you'll actually see how much value you have. And I already know what this would look like if I did it. What it would look like is this would all look flat in the same color, and there'd be a white line right here, and this would look whiter. So we need to darken this area here, get that contrast up, especially here under these folds, right? Now, as to the scales, yeah, absolutely. I can get you. You want to do fish scales, reflecty fish scales. I got you covered. Take yourself some Vallejo metal color silver, something like that, something real bright, and paint all of the scales in metal. Okay. Then you're going to take whatever color you want the scales to be. It could be a lot of colors. It could be a transition of many colors. You're going to take some of that paint or find an ink that does that. You're going to thin it down to a glaze transition, and you can thin it with a little satin varnish or satin medium or a little bit of gloss varnish, but don't go too heavy with that because it'll make it really thick. You just want a little bit there, mix in a tiny amount to get down to your glaze. You can use water as well, of course, to get to that glaze consistency. And then you start running controlled glazes over the scales. Glazes, not washes. I'm not, we don't want it to gather too deeply in the recesses. Ostensibly, when you do something like this, you actually paint the scales black. Then you apply the silver, but you don't apply it completely. You're not looking for a hard base coat. Think of it more like an aggressive wet brush or something, but you drag the silver down, so that way you would leave the dark line for the black in between each scale. Then you would glaze over the top in your color transition. You can work in a couple different colors. You can have, greens, reds, purples, blues, all work great for this. And after a couple layers of paint or ink or something, what you'll get is a vaguely scintillating, because the metal will just show through the color and it'll make the thing above it scintillate. It's almost like candy coating, but it's slightly different on fish scales because you're going for, you're looking for more of the sort of quote unquote metal to shine through, even though you're not actually using it as metal. If you want to see some examples of this in practice, go look at Matt DiPietro's work. He did a big fish as part of a wonderful crystal brush piece from 2 years ago, and he did that on the scales on there. He used a lot of different colors, but that was the base technique to unpack. So there you go. Hope that helps. It's a great piece, by the way. It looks really awesome. I like it a lot. Your color choice and composition here is wonderful. All right. Matt brings us the Starstrider kill team.
Yeah, and some really fantastic things. This is from the Rogue Trader kill team box, and he's done some conversions or kit bashes to change up a few heads here, and he's just looking to see how can he improve on this. How can he take this to the next level? The things I really like about this, first, you've got a really you're taking kind of an ivory tone to the armor and stuff, which I think is, and it has a really subtle wash to it. Maybe I don't know if it's sepia or just made his own wash from another color, but I think it works really well. And I think in this case, because of how ivory works, even when you carve it or put etching into it, etc., that having it be a light wash and not having a ton of contrast works out really well. If we look at this doctor on the far left side, he's gone with so he's got the yellow armor, and he's got kind of this bluish cloth or a cool white clothing, but it's almost like a bluish gray into a green, so it kind of warms it a little bit. That actually works for me from this photograph, works really well in contrast with that bone armor. And I'd actually like to see that in a couple of more places. For instance, the dude on the far right, who's got kind of the more armored guy with the backpack, that cloth on the bottom, you've gone with a darker brown. I think that'd be another place where it'd be kind of cool to go with this blue color. And for a couple of reasons, there's a couple of things that I think would unify all these models together a bit more. So you've got this ivory armor across all of them, which is great. I think having this blue cloth would be great. Now, I like that your leader has the red and is much more striking, etc. If we move to the next photo and we have some of your more foot soldier guys, a few of these guys, again, they've got kind of a lower cloth using that. Although I do like this brown, this darker brown next to the ivory as well, but finding that way to kind of bring that blue into these would be a great unifier, and do that. The other thing that I think would be great to unify the army a bit more would be adding this rich gold in. Now, where you've added that, so you look at this guy on the left who has the minigun, his bullets have that gold tone to it, which really works well with the rich ivory. Now, here's an instance where he has no red on him, and so making sure that each of these guys has kind of a little bit of that splash of color. Let's go back to the first picture, and we see that the guy on the far right has some gold on it, but the other models in this range, don't have as much gold on it. So I guess it would be some of that, is that finding some of those unifying pieces, and for me that blue on the medic is so striking and is so interesting that I would love to see that on some cloth throughout more of these characters, and get some more gold warm up next to the ivory and these other colors. I think that your highlights are looking really good from this distance, from what I'm seeing, and I think your overall color choices are fantastic, and I really enjoy this little kill team.
Right on. Okay, so next up, you've got your choice of 40k people. Would you like the Eldar or would you like the Ultramarine?
You choose this time.
All right, I'll choose the Ultramarine.
All
right. So Joseph says basically this is his first hero unit. He wanted to push out of his comfort zone. The cloak is his first attempt at glazing. He wants to up his contrast. Zenithal primed him and then used his airbrush to create some contrast and help out his edge highlighting. Great. This is a good fig. I like this captain fig or whatever. This guy, he's nice. So just a general piece of advice to help you out. We'll talk about metal separately, but I would get a different metal. This gold is not a great gold. In general, it's very full of pigment that's way too large. I talk about bad metals a lot. Look into like a Vallejo metal color, gold and copper mix, something like that would probably do you much better. Now, general composition note. When you're doing a figure like this, watch out for stuff like this orange sword. orange and yellows, and singular bright colors that distract from everything else. It's exceedingly bright and singular on the model. And, you know, it draws attention where we don't want it. This is the center of the fig. This should be the thing we're actually paying attention to, not this sword. But if you just relax your eyes and sort of stare at the whole image, the only thing you see is the sword. All right. So other quick notes on how to get more out of glazing. Let's talk about that. So the answer is don't glaze. Basically, glazing takes forever to get a lot of high contrast. You use glazing to get your final. You go one of two directions. Either you create it with an undershade. So like with your zenithal, instead of just zenithaling, be more intentional about it. That is to say, make sure that the cloak itself has a lot of really dark darks here and here and here, and be really careful with your airbrush making your highlights. And then you can do it with a few thin glazes. But what you want to do to create contrast in with glazes, as it were, is you actually use glazes to bring everything together at the end. So like on this cloak, I would put in some really dark purple or something here, 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 like as a layer paint, quite thickly, honestly. And then I would put something like a flesh tone or an orange like you did here, which is a nice choice, by the way, not going to white. I really like your color choice here. It's good. And then you go back to this mid-tone, let's call it magenta or crimson or whatever we want to say this is. And you glaze, not necessarily over everything. You could run one thin glaze over everything, but you do a couple glazes on the edges to bring it back together. If you're feeling real saucy, do it with your airbrush, but you got to be precise with it and have the paint be really, really, really thin glaze consistency. That's a little tougher. I'll leave that to you if you want to try that. But that you understand. So hopefully it's clear what I'm saying. You would push the highlights and the low lights way higher than they should be, and then use glazes to bring it back together. Same thing now on the Marine himself. The glazes can be used pretty straight away to create shadows, and that would be my other big recommendation. The blue is fairly flat. We also have some details we're not picking out. When we have rivets like this, they always need to be picked out. Things on the side of his helmet, just stuff like that. Make sure you're getting all the details in there and actually picking them out. Same with things like the shoulder pads. He's an Ultramarine captain. Get that U on there. Get something on there. Make it a decal. Try your hand at some freehand. Something. Go nuts. But that'll go a long way. With your metals, I have a couple videos on shading true metallic metals. I would highly recommend you look that up. At the very least, if you're going to do something, then take a little wash. Don't wash the whole thing. That's a quick way to kill metals. But like here in the feathers, I would draw some wash up under here, and then here toward the center, and then here toward the center, and in between the feathers, just to get some kind of more action there. Okay. And then finally, when you think about the face, you want to draw attention here. Captains have a lot of leeway to do this. You can make this part of the face the actual mask white. We could do the classic white captain stripe. Ultramarine captains, if memory serve, or lieutenants, maybe, I guess it is. Probably lieutenant. Has like a white stripe with a red stripe in the middle. You could do that. That would draw a lot of attention there and still work with your overall color scheme. So just stuff like that to get the focus back here. Overall, your blue is nice and applied. So like you definitely got some good action there. You could keep pushing it a little farther when you're doing your undershading. Push your whites a little higher here on your knees, on the face, and make your blue a little bit thinner would be my best advice. To kind of get a little more gradation. Use your undershading a little more. But overall, I think he looks nice, and definitely going to call out that you made the feet dirty, which I always respect. Very good job. You sat him in the universe. Marines should always have dirty feet. Hashtag dirty feet. Well done.
Bring us something good to eat.
There you go. All right. So, Eldar.
All right. A couple of questions. This spent 3 to 4 hours looking for a tabletop. Looking for feedback on the color scheme, on the jewels. What was the other thing?
Did he run the jewels?
1 second. So the gems come out convincing. Does the color scheme composition work? Any other tips, etc.? So first and foremost, This color scheme is really cool. It's super desaturated, kind of blue and gold with the red accents and the jewels. This cloak is just a beauty of blending from shadows to light, and doing this in just a few hours. Now, I mean, I know some people. So this is the other thing he said is that he took a break from the airbrush and went with hand painted. If you can get that paint pushing around, it can, for anybody looking at wet blending and that sort of stuff, once you kind of get the feel of how the paint works when you're pushing it around, this sort of stuff can go fairly quickly, and blending, on the model and putting paint together can work really well. And I think this is a really good example of quick blending that shows the highlights and darks, and you get a ton of contrast all over, even on the top side of that cloth, from where it's underneath the arm out to where it is at the tips. So fantastic look there, and on the tabard, etc. That design on his chest pops out really well, and on the top of his helmet, the gold's really dark and moody and antique. And all in all, there's just a really good feel to it. The jewels work pretty well. It does look like, I don't know if you went with, I'm just going to assume you did that all freehand as opposed to some of the jewel coats, which the technical paints, which work really well. But I think you have done a good job. You go with the color of the jewel down towards the bottom in a crescent, go up to a dark version of that, or a black towards the top, and with a pinpoint of light on the top as well. And it reads really well. Composition. Yeah, I mean, this model, and again, thank you for the multiple shots in one frame. There are some other ones, but I think this captures most of what we need. Composition is good. There's a few places where the blade, that greenish color on the blade, which is the most saturated color besides the red, could possibly use a couple other locations where it's popping out like that. Maybe that bracelet trinket that's underneath his wrist. It looks like there's a couple of shapes there that could maybe be used in that color. And maybe I'm trying to see if there's any of the elements on his helmet that can have that either. There's that yellow on the base, which seems kind of out of place. It doesn't quite work with the golds, and maybe it has some of that green in it, but that could be another place to use that jade green down on the base to kind of help that follow the eye around. That's not the only place we see it. Otherwise, I think you've done a great job of putting this, getting this done quickly for tabletop, while creating a really, really great mood with your color choices and the quick blending. Fantastic work.
Right on. Okay. So next up, we have Baba Yaga's Hut, a very interesting one from Devin. Devin's always giving us interesting stuff. And the babe here from Mr. Wade. I would really love to take the babe. You okay doing the hut?
Fine, I'll take the chicken legs. I love this theme. I love seeing many different renditions of it, and it's pretty cool. We've got some really good tones here, from the bright yellow of the feet with the wash, and the wood towards the top, getting into that same kind of color of yellow, so that it's not just yellow out of the blue. We can see some of that reflected in the yellow in the wood. But then we've got more weathered wood down towards the bottom, which, next to the ground, or where it was probably sitting for a long time before it sprung legs and walked away. The shingling is cool. That red is nice and standard. I think that the window is interesting. The blue certainly pops out. It reads a little bit more stained glass for as bright of a blue that is. Couple of things you could, if you're going to do a blue, maybe you shade it down to a brown, so it looks like it's kind of reflecting the horizon line or the sky and the earth, or you just take it down to a little bit more muted of a white grayish blue, etc. Let's move through a couple of these photos and see what else we can really cool model. I like how bendy it is, and a house like this is going to settle when it springs legs and bend and warp a little bit. So that's pretty cool. Nice drummies. Let's see. It's a little weird to me that it's on a cement block or that it's on some stones. But maybe that's explained. I didn't have a chance to read all of your thoughts. Let's see. The wood. Yeah. So basically the things I've been hitting on, the painting lots of wood, I think you've done a fantastic job with the wood and things getting weathered up to, just different ages of the wood throughout, depending on where it's at and what it's been, God, I can't think of the term, subjected to. The windows, as I mentioned, mute those a bit. Oil wash, I've not worked with oil washes, but the result that I'm seeing feels really good. You don't have a ton of tinting of the flat areas, but the recesses are very well defined. And then some feedback on the roof. What's fun about roofs is that depending on your material, let's go back to the left to the first picture. You can have a lot of different things there. You could have moss and stuff growing up there, so some greens would be really fun to match with some of the greens you have in your wood. Some creatures up there could be kind of fun if you had some other things like that. You could have some shingles, different colors, just to break it up, or some darker reds and lighter reds, etc. All in all, looking at this model would be fantastic to see on the tabletop, using it in an RPG or something like that. Very well done, brings this scene to life, and I really like it a lot. Thank you for submitting.
Right on. Sorry, I was coughing for a moment there, and I didn't feel that everybody else needed to hear that. Okay.
We want the full experience, Vince.
Sure. All right. So, Andrew brings us The Babe, a study of Ivan Hortle's use of bright colors. Well, as soon as I saw this, I don't know that you could paint a piece I'm more into. So, between the color choice and the figure and everything else, this is masterfully done. I really, really, really enjoy this. I'm gonna focus on her. The pig is fine. I enjoy the pig's mohawk. I think the pig is a pig. I think you got the pig well done. But I really want to focus in on sort of the main figure here. To me, I think the spot that's actually quote unquote the weakest on this is probably the hair. It's not because I don't think that she has the green hair is naturally, this is not realistic. No, it's perfectly cool. My challenge with the hair is actually it doesn't have enough color in it. So when I look at like the bikini, I actually, you've perfectly worked in the reflections. I take it to be that you're trying to capture it to be somewhat satin, so we can see the reflected underlight down here, and where we've pointed it here, so it's working in the opposite direction, where we have the environmental light pollution. So we go from light into a darker shade, and then here, effectively, the capturing the proper volume for this shape. The green hair is going to also have a similar satin element to it. It's going to be reflective. So like what I take this to be happening is the light is coming down like this. Your lighting's consistent. It reads correctly. Got the proper light here on her shoulder here. It's brighter up by her face than by her knee. I'm down with all that. My issue is I would have liked to see a little bit more of a very soft yellow tone pushed in near the light highlight. And I would have liked to see the shadows actually work in a different color. All of the hair shadow feels very much still green. And what I would expect to happen with the hair shadow is for it to absorb similarly some kind of opposing shadow color. So it should have like maybe a blue in it or something like that. That's sort of the thing that really kind of pops out at me. Having some deeper blues or even maybe like some purple shadows in some of this hair, I think would help sell it more. Now, as to the skin, I think the skin is masterfully executed. It's clearly what you spent a lot of time on, and you nailed it. Between all the various tones, you're working in wonderful, very soft, subtle tones here. No issue with any of that. I think that all looks fine. The only other piece is really the bracers, and I think they're okay. You could try a little bit more stippling maybe around some of the parts to add a little bit more texture in, or some similar visual interest like you had. You have a material texture here. You could do something similar here. They don't need to be satin. You could maybe do a stipple or something, and that would make them read slightly differently. But they're a pretty minimal part, and I feel like overall they're in the right place. I think this is great work, and really, really reads. I know you spent a long time on this, and it absolutely sells to me. So my one pushback would be, and you can really see what I'm talking about with the hair when we look at this back part here, right? We just have a lot of green tones, and hair needs to be richer than that, even when it's a imaginary sort of nuclear green color like this. I need a richer experience out of that. That's the weakest part of this. So there you go. Happy Piggy. Happy Piggy looks good. Overall, very, very awesome stuff, man. I dig the heck out of it. So well done. I hope this is going, like, given that it's on the plinth with the kind of base that you have here, I hope it's going somewhere to compete, and I hope it does well, and I wish you the best of luck. Okay. So next up, we've got a Blood Bowl team, and we have this Dwarf. Would you like to take the Dwarf, and I'll take the Blood Bowl?
Sure.
All right.
All right. Let's see. Jarrod's Dwarf. All right. Let's and I really want to get to his questions. Practice some non-metallic metal. That's pretty cool. Nice job, Tack, trying to jump into that. Looking some feedback there. And potion bottles. And so he realizes that he's also not put a ton of balance in the paint job, like the colors of the potions, and making sure that they're in other places. All right, so let's flip. So just from here, starting off, we can see that in the hammer, we can see it in the kind of the armor, elbow pad, the knee pad or knee armor, etc., that we're working with kind of a dark gray going up to a light gray. Let's move around the model a little bit, see what the next couple of images look like. Yep, let's stop there. There we go. Okay. That's either one of these two. That one's good. Okay. I think we're definitely reading. I think with your use of contrast here, I think it definitely reads that, and maybe some of this is from everyone's. If we're watching this, we know some experience with non-metallic metal, and so this is definitely reading. Where I think I'm reading the metal being the most successful is down on his hip armor, that where I've got really darks, and then I've got a few points where it's kind of light, and then it comes up to a really sharp highlight in this very vertical space, right underneath the kind of where that pocket is or where that fold is, and I can follow that beat of light very intentionally right there. Now I can see that up on the hammer a bit, where I've got some darks underneath, and then on the kind of towards the right, I'm seeing a lot of white metal. I really think that white metal needs to be a thinner, more concentrated beam of reflection. And in all, I think your move from dark to light is too gradual in some of these cases. So whether that be on the shoulder pad or whether that be on the hammer, that it looks almost more like how brushed metal works. So brushed metal kind of diffuses reflection, and so it scatters and makes that a more gradual movement from dark to light, whereas polished metal is going to kind of hyper contrast those reflections, and it's going to be super bright, where it's the light is hitting it directly. You're almost going to be able to see the exact shape of the object that is lighting it, etc. And so I think here, and let's go to the left one, and you might be able to see it a little bit more here, where on the shoulder, you're doing some. I think you've just got too much white on the shoulder that you need to save up that white for the really intense highlights. So I think the other thing that I've learned, not myself doing a ton of, I haven't done any non-metallic metal, so it's like, hey, why am I giving you some advice? Well, I look at non-metallic metal. I've heard Vince talk about it a million times. The things, the piece that makes this work is something I can't really articulate, and that's knowing exactly where to put the shadows and gradating up to exactly where the bright highlight is, and making it read as if it's all coming from the same light source, or is being lit in a very consistent way, but in a high, not a gradual transition between those things, but a very intense, stark transition between the lights and the darks. So otherwise, yeah, I mean, yeah, you've got those vials on his belt. You could, it's easy to find and cheat and find places for that sort of stuff to take place if you try. So that you should. You get no excuses. You get no points for not being clever in dispersing those colors. That's all I'll say.
Harsh, man. Harsh.
But yeah, great job tackling this technique.
Absolutely. Yeah, in the end, I'm not sure it's the biggest deal with the little potions, because they are so tiny. But I agree.
No.
You could do stuff like, you could find other little places to hide it, little jewels, little whatever. But it's fine. In the end, out of composition elements sometimes happen, especially when you're trying to tell a story. It's just, you can always try to balance it back in. Think about having little elements of blue or green down on the base. Could be like flowers or something, right? Like there's all sorts of crazy ways you can get color back into models.
Yep.
Okay. Next up, Blood Bowl. So Xavier brings us his Blood Bowl team. And what he's looking for is faces. He tried to find some good face gestures, armor weathering. So he had used some of the techniques that I talk about. And, his like blood spatter on the bases. So let's take a look. Okay. So I want to find one of my good face shots here. Here we go. Okay. Because this one's going to really bring it home. So they all look very surprised. And they look very surprised because we don't have our darkness around the eye. You went straight from like the skin tone to the white eye. And you also have tiny, your pupils are singular dots. And that's always going to not be the way you want to go. So when you have eyes like this, especially with these kind of football players, I'll give you two options. One, make sure you just fill the whole area in with something dark. I like a dark purple. I like a black leather from scale 75. Then I do like either a mid-tone gray or ivory. With that, I do not cover everything. I leave a nice dark rim around the eye. Then you come in with like a black ink or something like that, and you make sure that you get two options. You either place a nice hash or circle in the middle of the eye. It should not be a complete circle. Part of the top and the bottom should disappear at the top and bottom of the eye structure, because your entire iris is not visible. Like you have little pinpoint eyes here, and it's all white, so they look very surprised, very like as though they're up there on ayahuasca or something right now. So that's the other option. Is if getting that circle is tough, just put a dark dot or dark hash into corners of the eyes. Do the rightmost corner, do the leftmost corner, so it looks like they're looking left or right. And especially with football type of players where they have this action movement, they'd clearly be looking around on the field. You can totally sell that. Think of like the evil dog, where it's like looking from side to side. That was like a Simpsons joke or something, I think, right? With the you can just make the dog look evil by having him zoom in and be like dun dun and have his eyes go all the way to one side and the other. Think like that. It's probably a Simpsons joke. Everything's a Simpsons joke. So that's the biggest thing I noticed. Now, the second thing is more color. Like, see this similar feedback I gave previously on skin tone. You know, more color into the skin, more reds, more shades, especially around the cheeks, around the eyes, bridge of the nose, sides. Let's say the sides of the bridge of the nose, right? That kind of thing. That goes a long way. You can just carefully get a little Reichland flesh shade in there, even if you want to keep it super simple, and that'll work fine. Now, as to the scratches and hashes, I like the instinct. It's good. The problem is you fell for the trap. And here is the trap. These aren't organic. There's no explanation for them. They're just randomly around. The armor is otherwise perfect, and you made every dash the same size because your brain wanted to. You went ordered. You said, here's this one. Like, all of these are almost all identically sized and shaped. None were bigger tears. None were double tears. None are on the edge where it like would have ripped off a ton of stuff. You understand what I'm saying? Like, if you look at all these hashes, they're all within a very, very similar size and patterning to each other. Some should be triple scratches. Some should be big. Some should be rips and scripts. Some should be dots. If you're going to do this kind of thing, you got to really mix it up, and you have to break your brain. Your brain wants to make everything the same. Human brains like order. They don't like the chaos of nature and weathering and stuff. So if you're going to go this direction, you got to go with lots of different sizes. Some should be long streaks. Like, let's say on this guy, he has a couple, and like you should think about how are they working. This is a blitzer, so he's hitting somebody, right? Great. Then this is the shoulder he leads with. That's what the sculpt is telling me. Give me like 4 scratches going back here of varying lengths. That kind of thing, right? Also, with this deep red, you can't leave it pure white. It just doesn't look realistic. I mean, I know I talk in the video about the advantage of going pure white, but my best advice is when you have a red, it's so starkly contrasting. Red is this really interesting, weird challenge to this method. You need to come back in with a glaze and go over top of it. The next thing I would say is dots and patterns and things like that. Again, where rocks and things would come up, where small hits would dent the paint, as opposed to like just these singularly, similarly sized scratches. Okay. So you need to be much more random, much more organic, much more dispersed. And then after you do your white, which is fine, you need to come back in with a red glaze or an orange glaze to bring that white part back into color. So that's my main feedback for you on that part. Yeah, I think that'll probably give you plenty to work on there. I mean, overall, they're a well-painted team. I do really like the hair color choice. I think that looks really nice. I like the bright blue-white. I think you executed well on that. Oh, the blood spatter. You'd asked about that. Perfect. I have zero problem with the blood spatter. I think you absolutely nailed it. There, you did it. Your brain didn't make it the same. Think in the same way for the damage you did with the blood spatter. She has a big pool. He has 2 different size pools. He has little dots and heavier, thicker drips. You know what I mean? Like, you varied your blood patterning like you're Dexter over here. This is great. Okay. That's how you need to think of the damage as well. So like the blood, A+, beautiful. This is exactly right. So well done. Okay, let's see. Next up, we've got a Luda.
Got it.
And we have the this girl. Okay, cool. You take the Luda.
All right.
Luda.
Now, Daniel Rachels says, Luda specialist, heavy specialist for my kill team. I don't have any clear direction on what you're looking for feedback on. So, everything's fair game now. If we go, let's move one more. There we go. We're just going to get close up here. A couple of things. First off, your yellow on his helmet is really cool. Those checks are great. And I do believe I'm seeing a little bit of highlight on that yellow, meaning there's the your base yellow and then maybe one step up. I can see some that you in your musculature. If we go to the next one, perhaps that we do have some kind of shade, some highlights where we've got some dark greens and bright greens. And here, even on the red, I am seeing some highlights where you've base coated it, you've washed everything, and you've kind of gone over it. I'll say that I feel like your highlights are a bit rushed, and that could mean I know people suffer from many different things, whether it be shaky hands or whether be just being able to see that or having the right brush for it, etc. And if any of those cases that you can't help, that's fine. If you can help it, work on being more intentional about your highlights. What happens is this, and the other thing, it's possible this could be an old metal model, and some of the details aren't as crisp or that sort of stuff too. But then I think you just have to be extra special careful on that. So your highlights can be cleaner on even those muscles, but especially on the red, where I'm seeing the highlight in some spots but not others. It doesn't feel consistently kind of in the raise, the highest points. And so when that happens, it just reads as uneven color, or that, it wasn't, or, your green was laid down and then it was washed, but no highlight was done after that. So things like that, it doesn't read as intentional as maybe you put into it. If we go to the next one, similarly, I think it's the next one more. Yahtzee, where the metals are just kind of laid in, blocked in, and then washed. Having some more highlights, metallic highlights, to break up the space, to let me know what elements are separate from other elements, etc. Wash down those bullets again so that they pop a little bit more and separate a little bit more in that feed chamber, etc. And then the basing, two things, you need a few more elements on there, maybe a tuft or some rocks, and then the rim of it could be cleaned up quite a bit. So all of those things are yours to choose what to do with. But those are some things that I think could really, these Ludas are cool orcs, and you put a lot of time to in the checks on his helmet. Some more of that time paid to the rest of the model and getting the details in there is going to make this guy look pretty fantastic. That's all I got.
Right on. Okay. So Tim says his main focus on this model was the red cloak and the skin, but he's open about comments for the rest. All right, so let's talk about the red cloak. Yeah, I mean, it's nice. You've got some good color to it. You got some nice transitions. I see some purple in the lower tones. I think my main issue here is it just feels a little rough. That's probably the sculpt more than anything. But just what we actually need to do here is push some of the areas up a little higher, probably on the knee here, on the top of the arm here. And you can do that by adding a little more white and then glazing back in your red. But overall, I feel like the red dress is pretty strong. You could be a little more intentional with some of your shading. Take some of these shadows a little more intentionally dark here, 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 right? Like some of them are still a little flat. Like see this here and this one here. Like these are still, some of these are still a little bit flat and could use a little bit more of that shadow color worked in. Now, on the skin, same thing I said a couple times in this show, right? The skin's nice, needs more color. I need more red tone, purple tone, etc. in here to bring it to life, especially around the eyes. Same thing I just said about eye painting is going to apply here as well, although you got the pupils much better. This is what I mean, where the pupil is extending in both sides, but I needed a nice dark line around the eye. I need purple in the shadow right here. I need the top of the eye to have some red tones in it, and maybe going to pink where the over eye shadow is, and that kind of thing. Same with like the toes. You want to be a little darker in between there. I want to see, more pink and red in the feet. Tends to have the like extremities tend to show pink because there's blood and capillaries nearer the surface. We don't often have bare feet this much exposed, but things like the under the ankle bone, I don't know what feet areas are called, but whatever this part of it is, I guess bridge.
The bridge.
Yeah, there you go. So like in here often tends to be
Or
quite...
arch?
Oh, that's probably what it is. It's probably arch. Sure. Let's say yes. Okay. This thing I'm pointing at right now on the screen will tend to have a lot more pink in it. Same with like here where we get in between the metatarsals, right? Is that right? I think that's what those bones are. So down in that area. Same up here in her hands and fingers, right? So I think that kind of stuff is really what you want to focus on with the skin, bringing more rich tones into it. I would also say you want to highlight the face some more. You don't want to highlight skin evenly. You always, when you're doing models, you always want to have the face slightly over highlighted because that's where we're drawing attention to. That needs to be the center of the model. So make sure you have your brightest highlights, like here on the side of the nose, here on the side of the cheek, lip, chin, that kind of thing. So there you go. But overall, cool piece. I don't know what this piece is. Some kind of Russian, like, I don't know, Cossack, sort of traveling Romani player, like a little, I don't know, instrument player, kind of cool lute player. It's a neat, very unique model. I've never seen it. I don't know what that is. All right. I'll tell you what, is it all right if I just keep rolling here?
Yeah.
All right, because this one's about OSL, and I had looked at this and I thought of some feedback earlier when I actually saw this one get popped in here.
Cool.
So this is his first time post, and basically his question was, is he selling the OSL? Right? I mean, that's what it boils down to. Does this sell? All right, good. Well, like a short answer, you're definitely on the right road. Yes, it sells, but not for as much as it could. Okay. So the red reflection here in the gold is great. I need a little, like, that's pretty much spot. No change. Yes, nailed it. Great. Red reflection here on the rocks. You'll want to take the edges of these up just a little. The edges of the rocks where the light will catch and gather, you want to push more into an orangish tone to show that it's gathering there. Same, by the way, with the skulls. Here on the edges of the skulls where light will collect and gather. So really, that's the biggest part of your highlight. You want to have these light points where it's not all going to be evenly dispersed red. You're right that you want it to be mostly this diffused darker color. That's correct. But remember, light is still light, and light is still going to collect on points where it will build up. Little tiny outcroppings, edges, nose ridges, where, all these places like that. Now, let's talk about this yellow line. This needs more transition. I need to see more in here. I like the color. Love the white here in the center. Looks super hot. I need more deep orange in here in between these two. And the final thing about OSL is you cannot strike a match without creating a shadow, other than being a moral solipsism or whatever from sort of fantasy tropes. It's also true for OSL. Like if this is bright, this needs to be dark. So when we look around, it was one of these shots that showed it really well. Yeah, there you go. That's the one I was looking for. Okay, cool. This should be way darker. Back here should be way darker. Back in here. In other words, think about where the light would naturally cast shadows, and that needs to get way, way, way darker. Like down into deep shadow. Here, here, here. Backside of the base here. Those need to be super, super deep shadows. Right? I like to do that with black pigment, by the way. That's how I usually work it in. I work contours with black pigment to create shadows on bases. Much the same way that that like makeup tutorials use pigment to create shadows. It's the exact same technique. So go watch some contouring videos if you got pigment. That's my best advice. Yeah, final note is make sure you get the rim of the base evenly dispersed. Like, I don't know if you're trying to go for like, oh, lava's pouring over the side. Don't do that. It won't look right. That's a cool trick if you're doing like a display piece or something and you're pouring over the edge of a plinth. For an actual base, this should be a solid, thick, clean, crisp, jet black line. And that's really important for a base like this because it will the sharp line will actually sell this more. Okay. So there you go. Overall, though, like, it's really cool. Your red tone looks wonderful. It's super nailed it. The reflections up here, like your diffuse color is exactly where you want it to be. It's very well executed. Dryads.
All right, Nick just finished his second unit of 20 Dryads. He painted the first one 3 years ago. The other was a newer one, so he's kind of painting with some more confidence. Let's see. Not asking for anything specific, but let's take a look and see where we can help him. So really cool tones. We've got some greens and then a purplish brown from the photography. At least that's the color I'm seeing. And I'm seeing it brightens. In some cases, it feels like it's brightening a little bit towards the face. But I think we could push that further. Really, kind of, we've got some dry brushing on the bark, which is a fantastic technique for this kind of surface. Trees are dry. Trees in this particular sculpt is very kind of dry looking. So I would push it even more in the face area in order to just, again, make the face the central, the brightest kind of part of it, so that the eye goes there. And I think that really makes this model and unit kind of feel like its most humanoid self. Great look on the basing with that foliage and the kind of fallen leaves, etc. That looks great in a lot of places. In a few of those, I can see that we've got some grass tufts, some flowers, and not every base has all of the elements, and that's really great too. The other piece I would say is, so we've got the kind of the green colors, we've got the browns, we've got kind of a purplish tone in there. I think that if you were to take these any further, it would be kind of adding some brightness, magic kind of color, like a blue or a yellow, since you've got it in the flowers, doing kind of like a yellow, bright yellow for their eyes or for some of the carvings on their flesh, etc. In the owl's eyes, that extra splash of color would really help these pop and give you a significant pop color throughout the army as well. So I think, you've done a fantastic job matching all of them to this model you did a long time ago. They look great. The basing looks fantastic. Brighten that face up a little bit and maybe use yellow as a pop color in their eyes and other magical elements. Those are my thoughts.
Right on. Okay, so next up, okay, last one before we take our break. I'll grab this one. Plague Marines to a higher standard, and he's been happy with the results. First time trying to seriously weather something, so any extra tips on that would be appreciated. Well, let's take a look. So first of all, I like the scheme. I think that works really well, actually. I like the sort of white, you're almost Heresy era type scheme, but then you've got the strong green parts. Let's see if I can get a couple good ones. These are nice shots. As to the weathering, I think the weathering is fine-ish. So let me talk about what jumps out at me. Like, overall, I think this is really good. You're a little Christmassy because you're using a very saturated red. Let me talk about the use of the red. It's not directly what you asked, but it's like you went very, very, very red and very, very, very green. And so we get these Christmas Marines. In general, with stuff like this, I would recommend you desaturate your red even more, generally with a brown tone. One, it'll make it look more Nurgly. Two, it'll make it look less Christmassy. Might be a little too late for that now, but that would be my thought. Like, if this was much more of a deeper brown red, you'd have a dirtier, more Nurgly looking thing, and you wouldn't quite get that like Santa Claus effect. These guys look a lot stronger. They don't have near as much red in them, right? You look at the difference here. With the bone, push your contrast there higher. Like, bring these darker towards the top, if that's what you're doing, and lighter toward the bottom. I need to see more run with that. Nurgle really gets to black on one of the ends because the bones are rotten and gross. As to the weathering, I think a lot of your rust and stuff like that on the steel looks really good. I think you could push some of the copper type weathering a little farther in the places where that shows up. Give me some more like verdigris, things like that. But the rust, I think, is strong, especially because you're focusing on like getting it into the pock marks and things like that. I would love to see some of it in the armor, where the armor has all these pock marks and stuff. Give me some streaks and give me some orange and brown down in those pock marks in there. Same, by the way, on the green to help break up this like minty yellow green. Here's a minty green's the wrong word. I don't know what to reference to break up this very strong green, getting some nice brown around the rivets, leaking rust, rusty rivets, stuff like that will go a long way to making that green feel less, because it's a very clean, naturey green. Like you're using a healthy green. That's the color of a tree in springtime, and these guys are rotten from the inside out. That creates a clash, right? So having more brown in there, more rusty bits, more parts around the rivets and stuff where things are starting to go, that will really sell it. That every part of these guys is rusty, crusty goodness. Okay, but overall, pretty cool. I mean, I very much like the color of the armor itself, and I think if you break up that green some, it's going to look really, really good. Your bone overall looks nice. The choice of the orange for the plasma weapons looks fine. No issue with that. Basing has some nice goopiness to it. Don't just do cork broken up, please. Put more on those. Break that cork up more. Get more color into the cork, not just gray. It needs to be something else. Green wash it, purple wash it, put something into it. Don't just use gray cork. Gray cork just looks like gray cork. They're not standing on rocks. I look at that and I go, oh, cool. They're standing on giant pieces of cork. So do something with it. The goopy green looks great, though. A+ on the goopy green. I'm all about the goopy green. Goopy green's wonderful. Good goop work. Okay. So with that, that brings us to the intermission section. So let's all go to the lobby.
I was thinking that song was right at my tip of my tongue.
There you go. So we're going to take a little break. We're going to go to the lobby. We're going to grab ourselves a popcorn refill, maybe another soda, get ourselves some Mike and Ike's, some Raisinets. I'm just joking. No one eats Raisinets. They're the worst thing ever. They shouldn't be candy. I don't go to the movies and or ever get candy to eat raisins. It's insane. It's insane. At any rate, we'll be back in just a minute. We'll finish out the month. So we'll see you in just a moment. All right, we're back. It's just me for right now. Some others might be joining, my compatriots, but they weren't. We had some scheduling challenges, but don't worry. I'm going to take you through the rest of the submissions for the month of May. We're going to jump back into it, and we'll do the rest of the reviews. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. So let me go ahead and share up here. All right, so we start off with Scott Radom, who has some Necromunda. Scott, first thing, you got to say what you want us to comment on. That's me giving you but that's okay. I'll give you some thoughts. Yeah, I mean, these guys look really good. All in all, I think they're obviously really nice. I like your bases. They look good. I think your blacks work really well here. The little scuffing and scratching and stuff, minor highlights, which I think works really well. If I had any feedback for you or where I might challenge you, I think it's just on the metal. Your metal is very dark to the point where it blends in with the stuff that isn't metal quite a lot, at least in this picture. Maybe in real life it looks a little different, but this is one of those things that could potentially be the lighting. But I would push you to have some more edges on your metal, like things like this sword. Give me some more shiny reflective edges to really push those highlights up. Give me some interesting, slightly more reflections in some of the metal pieces. That way they stand out a little bit more. The other thing I would push you on is the leather. So when we look at these guys seem like real rough and tumble types, but their leather is very clean and new. I'd love to see some scuffing, some scratching, some texture in that leather. I think that would really add a lot more visual interest to these guys and really take them up to the next level there. But all in all, they're very cool. I love it. You're using a lot of very neutral tones, and yet they still have a lot of character. And I just want to comment how much I really love the faces. You worked a lot of nice color, and your highlights on your faces are really good. They have very expressive faces. I think you brought that out really, really well. And that, in the end, is one of the most important elements of the miniature. So very well done. Okay. Next up, Marco. He's got another hound for us. He says it's his first attempt at OSL, and he tried some freehand texture of the wood. Sorry, that sneeze was coming on. I tried to take my headphones way off my head. I couldn't get to the mute button in time. I really hope that wasn't super loud, and if it was, I am very, very sorry. But anyways, so here he says, some feedback on that. So let's take a look at our Chaos Wolfie here. So obviously he's going for, we had seen the previous version of this, and he's got some, he's doing the fire chaos dogs. And this guy is clearly not having a great day. This guy who's being tackled by this chaos dog. I think all in all, I think I'd still like to see, with the fiery effect, I'd still like to see a little more orange in the fire and a little bit less true red. That, again, could be a photo thing. Orange, yellow, and red are famously terrible in photographs, so could be that. But I would mute out some of this yellow, turn it a little more ochre, except for the very edge, and bring the orange up to be a little more like fire has a more orange tone to it in general when we catch it in solid form on a miniature. So I'd love it if, like, let's take this area, for example. If, like, here to here was orange, and then you left red and maybe some deep red black down here at the tips. As to the OSL and that effect, it's pretty minimal. Some of the places it's a little harsh in the transition, like here. You can see where you have the light and then it kind of dies. So you want to think of a couple different things when you do OSL. The first thing is you want to have it be quite intense at the area where the light is really catching. So here on the edges of folds, and you captured that well here on the front. It's just not as strong right here. But I like these flaps right here. But remember, when you have light, you also cast a shadow. So this underside of him should be much, much darker. These areas that aren't exposed to light should be heavier in shadow. So that would be my advice for those two pieces. As to the texture on the wood, I think it looks fine. I think you could push it even a little farther. Like the freehand texture you added to the otherwise flat pieces, I think sells. I think you could go a little farther. Give me some random lines that are a little deeper, especially near the edges where it's chopped or cut. You could have a little bit fresher, a little brighter lines, work in some ivories and some deeper colors. And I think you're good to go there. But all in all, very cool. All right, Benjamin, he brings us this crazy thing, this crazy vehicle. So let's check it out. He says he started painting 6 months ago, and mostly for his War Machine army. He tried his hand at OSL and some glowing energy crystals. Any tips on how he could improve it? What a crazy cool vehicle. I love this thing. This is awesome. Yeah, so let's talk about airbrush OSL. Because that's what you're using here to do this. And I can tell that because just the nature of the spray pattern of bright colors, where you hit it here and you shot it here and stuff like that. I mean, I can see the speckling patterns. You get this white intensity from airbrush stuff. So when you're doing this kind of OSL, like the first question is, does it sell? And the answer is yeah-ish, because it's really, really intense, right? So you've got a bit too much bright color here. The part of this I like the best is this center thing, whatever this is, that's kind of glowing. I enjoy this part because you got it really bright here, but then it goes and gets really dark. So it looks glowing. Again, like, just to repeat what I just said, one of the secrets to OSL is that light casts shadows. So like here on these glowing balls, which I assume is what we're aiming at here, right? There's too much white, number one. If we're going to do any white at all, it should be extremely minimal. Like, go back over with your glazes and take most of that out, except for a tiny spot of white. That's number one. Don't finish with the airbrush. Same goes for these glowing gun things up front. Like, there might be a little bit of white right here, but the rest of this should be blue tinted to some way. Secondly, you want a nice dark line. So I'm just going to break down one of these balls and talk about it in detail. Because like this is a very easy shape to do glowing with, and it'll be instructive for what we're aiming at. So I would shrink the white down and have this be mostly blue, just a light blue glaze over top. I would take this edge right around here and like sort of picture an edge around this ball, and I would make it quite dark. Okay, like I would take like a Payne's gray or something like that. Think a dark blue black, and have a nice thin line of that around, and maybe a little thin glaze of it extending up slightly onto the ball. And then I would have a weaker version of the same color. This is where your airbrush really can shine, when you're just doing the glow itself. Because what you want is effectively a glaze of your mid-tone blue, whatever, because if this is like 1, 2, 3 and light values, you want a weak 2 out here fading to sort of nothing. So what I would say is you take that blue, you airbrush it along here very carefully. And then here's the dark circle will sell it a lot better. Less white will sell a lot better. And here's the real key. Extend the blue glaze out farther than you think it would reasonably glow. And then take this purple that you're using for the hull, thin it way, way down and bring it back up just a little. So let's just like to make this real right here. I would take the blue glaze up to here, and then I would take the purple back down to like here. And that sounds weird. Why would you cover over your work? Well, it's because a slight bit of that blue undertone will still shine through the purple. And what it'll give you is you'll avoid this sort of thing, where you have a much more hard line, right? And some of these lines, even with the airbrush, are quite hard, like right here, right? And we want to avoid that. The light should trail into a very minimal, like fading shadow, okay? Or sorry, fading light source, opposite of that. So yeah, that's my main thought on that piece. Overall, I think it's really cool. I like the colors. When you have copper and stuff like this, make sure you give those linings and some highlights in there. Like one of the problems is you have such high contrast on all of this stuff, and then your copper is just flat. So this looks less interesting, even though it should be shiny, reflective metal, than your glowing stuff. So make sure you have your silver edges or something like that. You know, get highlights and shadows in your metals. Make sure those look as interesting as well. But this is a really cool piece. I mean, for 6 months in, you're kicking butt here. Your color choices are on point. You're clearly understanding the light, because like your placement of where it's going and where it's reflecting is correct. You just need to kind of soften things and play with your color balance. OSL is really tough. But all in all, I think you've done a great job of constructing the composition of this model. I think so. I think that looks absolutely wonderful. Yeah, super well done. Okay. Brian Latour brings us a fun bust. And so his questions are on the TMM. He's struggling a lot with the flat surfaces, and placing the light was tricky. Okay. And so it's fine. We'll talk about that. Tattoos. All right. We'll talk about the tattoos. And he says, you know, do they actually look like tattoos? And then the story, he wanted the tattoos to tell a story that she's a steampunk mechanic who, losing her hand, invented a steampunk robot hand to replace it. Okay. So let's walk through this. Obviously, a bit of you know, we got the competition sort of thing with the named base here, which I like. Quick point on the named base. I like your gears and all of that. Make sure when you do this text that you have it really well defined. Like one thing I notice here is that it's a little sketchy and dry and chalky in some places and gets thin. Make sure this is like, go over this a few times very, very, very carefully. This needs to be clean and sharp. So just a quick note. Now, as to the metals, I think your metals look fine, honestly. You know, where should the light and shadow fall? The answer is wherever you want it, as long as it's somewhat consistent. So what I mean by that is, if you tell me, because light can be reflecting from any area, you're going to tell me where your light is by what you construct on the piece. So just carry that through, right? And what you've told me is that light is basically coming from this angle right here. Her hair is highlighted here and here. The glasses are highlighted here and here. So we have like a slightly off-center downward light, probably like 1215, 1230, right? Because you have a little more light on this side of the face than you do on this side, just slightly. By the way, this reflection should be moved over like about that much. Now, as to like, I think the steel really sells. I think that looks good. Now, as to whether or not the center line would really be the brightest part on a reflection like this, it would not, like, I think actually would probably be a little more up because this is actually would be a reflected light point. But again, it doesn't matter too much because light bounces off everything, you know? So as long as you construct sort of a take that makes sense, it's fine. I think your actual challenge here is more, we need a little bit more smoothness to the color transitions. Like the lines are still rather harsh, especially here, here, here. So you want to make sure you really smooth that out. That would be my best advice. But like, as to the light and shadows, are they realistic, what you've created? Yeah, I buy them. I think they're good. I think the neck piece looks really, really solid. I think the neck piece and the steel is the most solid. I think the gold is where you got the most challenge, and that's kind of exactly what you said in the comments. So I agree with that. I would take the gold up a little higher in some places into more of a silver. Make sure we capture all the edges. But yeah, on the whole, I think it's pretty good. Smooth out the transitions, and then create variances in brightness of reflections. So for example, if this is the high point reflection here, then what you're telling me is the gold light on this angle is falling toward the bottom. Yet up here, you have the gold point up top. So like these need to be consistent, right? It's fine if you tell me this is how light is moving. Light can move however you want it to on the miniature, as long as you're consistent. Either this and this are the brightest points, or this and this are the brightest points, not both. Okay. All right, so now let's talk tattoos. She has a lot. Do they work and look like tattoos? Yeah, I think so. You know, I think like one of the things you want with tattoos is you want them to be relatively sharp, because they would have been applied by somebody who was a professional artist theoretically, and so won't be all squidgy and terrible. Now, that's not always true with real tattoos, as like any tattoo fails Facebook or thing will show you. It's a little tough because your lighting's different. I think this is the more true lighting. And what I'll say here versus sort of, so when we go to this picture where I think you're a little overexposed, this actually is more correct. Like this tattoo, it's not how I think it looks in reality, because I think this is just lighting being too strong. But actually, this is giving us a good example where you want the tattoo to look a little faded, where the skin is going over it. So my advice would be, do you have the right idea? Sure. Can I read the narrative? Well, you told me the narrative pretty straight on. So, and I'm okay with it. I have no issue with that, or the heart, or any of this stuff, like all your symbols and your gears and cogs. Yeah, that totally sells. I dig all of that. What you want to do is take some of your mid-tone skin tone and come back in and just very lightly glaze over it. Let it dry completely. Let it set. See how it looks. And then maybe do it again. The more you glaze, the older the tattoo will look. But your placement of the ink is a little too strong at this moment, unless she literally just got the tattoo like 5 minutes ago, in which case the skin around it would also be red, but that's not what I mean. So yeah, just a little bit of that. But no, I think it's all in all pretty good. Very, very cool submission. I dig it. On a different note, when it comes to busts of this scale, and we can see just how big this is. Like, this is a big bust. And you can see it when we go here and compare it to, you know, the normal fig. One of the things is you're putting about the same amount of detail. Like, let's look here on her real quick. See her shoulder pad, this red here, this blue here. Now up here, we have the same amount of detail here as here. When we get into busts that are of this size, I need more. I need more texturing, scraping, hashes, micro abrasions, cloth fabric showing, you know, things like that to create visual interest at the scale, because I would be able to see them, right? When you get to a scale of this size, texture would become very immediately visible. So you want to make sure you build in those extra details at that size. All in all, very cool stuff. Okay. Bartek said it's been over a year since his last submission. Here's a Grand Omegas that he did for Tommy Soul's competition. Tried a more dramatic light source. One obvious from the lantern and one from somewhere behind. All right, let's take a look. Okay, cool. So we've got him standing in a green light. A very neat, moody piece. I dig that. I think I've seen this lantern before, this lamp piece. That's pretty cool. I dig it. So, just things I notice. One, the ground back here is in darkness. That's fine. It's too flat. It's like this, your basing here has no life to it. Here it's just green. Here it's just purple. Like what we need is some life to this. There should still be differences, texture. The stone should have edges. They should have brightness. Light catches should be happening. Like there should be minor color variations, even in the purple darkness, right? There should be something. The base is the first thing I notice because it's so flat. Okay. Secondly, is I get the impression he's not actually green skinned, but that this light is doing that. If that's the case, if he's supposed to be green like Martian Manhunter, then the green lighting is going to be very hard to read, right? Because you're putting a green light over a green skinned character. If he's supposed to be flesh colored and the light is affecting him, which is what I think is the case, because back here his skin is purple, right? Then we need to not be this strong. Like if I go stand under a red light, I don't turn this red, especially not outdoors, right? But that's where this guy clearly is, right? This is a street lamp. And there's other light in the world. There's a moon or something like that. But even barring that, right? There's just ambient reflected light in the world unless you're in a cave. And so this light being this green, like this is a really saturated, intense green. His skin would have to just, it's absorbing way too much color. What we would want here is for the skin to still be skin colored, but be green tinted skin colored, right? The only time you get really a full transition into a color, the only time you get like a full transition into a color like that is if you, is if you're, like in movie lighting where it's just a really, really red source. And even then, there's still a little bit of flesh tone to it, right? Especially in things like shadows. So same goes for the purple, although the purple's a little bit less noticeable because your highlights still captured a bit of it. But he just feels too green. We'd want to desaturate that into flesh tone. Same then up here. Like the other thing that really stands out to me is this purple edging around his, whatever this is. I don't know. His like Pope sash here. It's quite flat, right? And if we have a bright light source, then things are going to happen here. Like something is going to happen to the edges of this. It's going to catch green light. It's going to change in some way. You're going to have deeper shadows. So just making this doesn't feel like it's in the same light as everything else, right? So that's the other thing that jumps out at me. All in all, though, really cool piece. I mean, we can't see it too well, but I love all this like freehand you did here on the back. I think that looks really awesome. And it's painted very, very sharply. The red gem looks nice. I actually think the red gem would stay perfectly red. I have no problem with that. Your light placement's really good. Red being the contrasting color to complementary color, whatever you want to say, to green means it wouldn't actually absorb any green light or turn green. So I have no problem with that. Cool stuff. All right, Oriole, the queen. He said this is his entry on a yearly painting competition at GW. Sure. I said, don't be afraid to be hard on you. Okay. All right. So let's take a look. So the patterning is neat. Let's start with the beetle. The patterning is neat. I dig the heck out of it, but the beetle's way too flat. Like we're relying on more or less the satin sheen of the paint to do all the work here. This part is just as highlighted as this part. This is just as highlighted as this. Natural light is doing some work, but that's it. So like one of the things I need here is I need some more control over this light. I need some more highlights. I need some more shadows. I understand he has kind of this glossy carapace, but I need something. The patterning looks fantastic. Just go in and lay in some glazes into the shadows to actually take back control of the light. So that's my first thought. Next up, let's see if we can get in on Oriole here. There we go. I knew there was a close-up. Okay, same thing goes for her and her robe. she's the center point of this. Basically, here is I could sum up all of my feedback to you in our favorite words: tonal variation. I need more contrast. I need more tonal variation across the piece. So her helmet is boring. It looks basically wood and flat, and it's the same color as her arm, and it's the same color as this bone, and it's the same color as the sticks on her leg, and it's the same color as the sticks she's standing on. None of that is separated. And that's a problem, right? Meanwhile, I've got this yellow hair here. There's no other yellow in the piece, so this stands out like a sore thumb, and I have nothing drawing me back. Like if this were gold and this were gold, and maybe like the center point here was gold, so I had something kind of moving my eye around to work with the yellow, we'd have a little more direction. But more contrast, more tonal variation. Push some highlights up here. Give me something different happening on the ridges here, or something happening in between on here. Deeper shadows around here, something like that. Same with her skin. Her skin feels flat. I need to see some like red tones, sepia tones, stuff like that in the skin to really enliven the piece, because she doesn't feel alive right now. Right? We can do that with careful applications of things like Reikland Flesh Shade. You're not washing it. You're taking it and doing subtle glazes of it to make her feel alive. Bring it into her cheeks. Her lips feel not, I understand she's probably not wearing makeup, but she would still have quite red lips, just because humans have red lips. So like her lower lip feels way too desaturated. I need color there. Same with around like her eyes, things like that, in between her fingers, up here as we move up her thigh, the musculature here under her knee, in her ankles, just all these places where we would normally have a more intense collection of blood being nearer the surface. And so hence we would expect to see life in the skin. But the same thing goes on the wood, like this part. Same thing goes on the feathers here. Just in general, up your tonal variation. I know you can do it because you did this spear. And like the spear is fantastic. This blade up here looks wonderful. I love it. This is great. Wonderful variation in this non-metallic spear scheme. I'm not asking you to take everything to this level of contrast because you wouldn't want to. This is meant to be much shinier and brighter and made of, like purple metal. Super cool. But the others parts need more. We need something in between this and this. Okay. All right. So hopefully that helps and gets you ready for your competition. What I love here though is that you clearly have the chops. I can see that through like the incredible freehand on the beetle, the work on the spear. You've got the skill. Also, the paint here is applied really, really, really cleanly. So I do appreciate how sharp your paint job is. That will do you well. All right. Lahoma says, using these metal Sister Superior models to plan out her color scheme for a small army of raging heroes. Any comments or helpful tips in terms of colors, bringing up more fine detail, etc. New to painting miniatures. But you've been a canvas painter for your whole life. Super cool. Well, then you probably understand color and stuff like that, so you'll be in a good position. Okay. So, my first thought, this is not a negative judgment on you, especially if you're a new painter. Take whatever metal paint you're using, throw them in the garbage, and go get yourself some like Vallejo metal color. Not model color, not game color, not model air, not game air. Vallejo metal, METL color. Because I can see this chunkiness, this visible pigment in the metal. We don't want that. That's no good. Also, be careful with metal figs. You can have stuff like this happen where her sword bent. Make sure you like bend that back, or it kind of makes it look weird. It's a problem with older pewter miniatures. You won't have to deal with it with the resin, but just a quick note. Now, as to like I said, that's not in any way a judgment on your painting. Newer painters often have whatever paint they have, but I'll tell you right now, I don't normally make paint recommendations because I'm fine with any brand out there for most purposes. This is just one of those things. Okay. That aside. Yeah, I think your main challenge is, moving to miniatures from canvas. You have to be a lot more controlled than you do with, a canvas where you have a lot more freedom to kind of push paint around and have colors kind of be more fluid. And so I would focus on getting just practice and stuff on getting your paint cleanly applied and things like that. Like here in the face where we can see, we want a nice clean separation line between the face and the hair, that kind of thing. All in all, as far as color scheme goes, nope, I think you're good. I like this. I think the red looks nice. We could add a little deeper shadows into the red. So you could take some sepia tones or purple tones, depending on what you want to go with, and bring those into the shadows. I think that's fine. Oh, there you go. I like that color a lot better. One just sort of compositional note for you when it comes to things like basing. Make sure you do something with the base. Like that is a dry brush it, paint it. It should be a world in the same way as your miniature is. And also be careful putting big tufts in front of miniatures. Like you generally don't want to put a giant tuft like this in front of your miniature because this is all I can see. It blocks out the lower part of your miniature in a big way. You can trim these. Like if you want to use grass in front of her, that's fine. Just cut this. Take some very sharp scissors and cut this down to 2 millimeter size. Like shave it right there. And suddenly this thing's not a problem anymore. Also, when you use tufts, paint the tuft. By that, I don't mean like literally prime it and paint it. I mean, take some wash, put it in there, and then take a light color like a pale sand or an ivory and dry brush across the top because you want it. And then when you use your wash, shove it way down in the heart of this thing and then put some on the ground around it. That way it feels like it's actually part of the world and not just a tuft you glued onto the base randomly. So those are my thoughts. All in all, it's a good job. You have a very good instinct for color placement and all that sort of thing. So I think that this would be a perfectly great scheme. Compositionally, I don't see any challenges with moving this on to other models. Looks good. Okay. Alexander, aka Fulcrum, you pulled your tank. Well, I think we already did your tank, buddy, unfortunately. But that's all right. So he revisited his Darth Vader model. And he says, so, he went back and applied what he learned to Vader. And yes, this is like a really challenging model because Vader has all these different, he's all black, but he has all these different looking sort of surfaces, right? Like some of it's cloth, some of it's a weird kind of plastic, some of it's metalish, whatever, right? And so, it's an interesting challenge here to balance the OSL against whatever environmental light he has. And I agree with that. So let's take a look and see how successful he is. The first thing I would say is I feel like the lightsaber's too weak. It's not red enough. It feels really orangey, fleshy toned. I will also say that, like, in general, I like the lightsaber. I think, having a lightsaber is always like a really weird thing to paint anyways. But I've seen a couple takes on lightsabers I really like. And the one I really, really like is actually running a couple lines down the middle of light and then fading out around it. So like you kind of light here and you light on the opposite side with sort of white, and then you kind of go out around it into a darker color. So you kind of pick an angle and it rotates around between bright and fully saturated intense color. And you never go into actual shadows. You just have like points of extreme light running down the middle this way instead of horizontally instead of vertically. So I would intensify the red a little bit in Vader's saber. Like I know you're making it match this color, but I think if this were more red, I would buy the reflection more. Now, as to the actual reflections, let's talk the OSL itself. I actually think you're really good there. And even if this were to be more red, I wouldn't change the OSL at all. This is reflecting a more red thing than you have given me here. Okay. I think your placement of light against shadow is good. I like the white light of sort of as you mentioned, like, these, you look at like Star Destroyers and they have a lot of like very clean, bright white light on them. So I think that's actually very well captured. These light catches are really solid. I would still push the knuckle light catches out just a little more, like maybe here on this side, maybe here. Just because he's really theoretically clutching the lightsaber tightly. And I feel like you could push that highlight up just a little more here. I know this is meant to be cloth and you're trying to dull it out. Totally got it. Completely understood. I feel like we could still push a couple of those knuckles up a little more just because it would be doing it. But I think I love the way you have captured the sharper and you've gone higher consistently across like the plastic or metal or whatever it's supposed to be, right? The more reflective substance. I think that works quite well. And like where you've chosen to place your light catches and your light and your subtle glazes all totally sells for me. So I think that looks good. And then you've the fact that you capture deeper shadows, like really, really deep shadows in here and in these places. Yes, that is the shadow that matches the light. So I think I think it's really, really solid. The saber itself, I think, is the main thing you'd want to change up. I don't think I'd change him at all, other than the tiny knuckle points. All right, Caspian. I finished some Shadespire stuff, and he's looking for feedback on hair. Well, hey, who doesn't love painting hair, right? I do. I love painting hair. All right. So I'm going to move through the pictures here to try to find exactly one where we get a good hair shot. There we go. Okay. So we're going for sort of this kind of whitish blue hair. I dig that. That's a nice color choice. What I'll say, Caspian, is my thought is we probably want to focus on instead the highlights look like they were achieved here by kind of they're flat and even in that you have kind of a wash to get the recesses, and then we kind of picked out the lines of hair itself. Whereas I think what would look more convincing is if there was you think more like a Pantene hair dye bottle. So you'd have a rim of light around the edge of the crown of the head. This would be much darker. This would fall darker here. And then we'd come back out to the white at the tips, right? So this would go more deep blue or something, and deep blue here, fading out to like a light blue, to like the white here, to a mid blue, to a really dark blue, out to a light blue, and then out to white here. I think walking a line like that will give you a much better kind of overall impression on the hair itself. Okay. But very cool models. I like the colors. As usual, you always have a great, your submissions are always very colorful and bright. So I dig it. Okay. Edson, the wise woman, such a wonderful bust from Spira Mirabilis. Question is, if this model is representative as of his current skill level, what should you be looking at improving and practicing more? So it is a broad question, but I'll see what we can do. See what we can do. Okay. So I wish I had a slightly closer picture, but that's okay. All right. Talk about things that I love. I love the freehand. It looks absolutely wonderful. These red, the red checker pattern. The owl totem on the back looks fantastic. And the texturing on the fabric here is top notch. I dig it. I dig it. I dig it. You weathered the edges. I would push this even a little more. Now, the skin of the face is where I think we've got some opportunities. So what I mean by that is she's clearly older, and older people have a lot of different discolorations in their skin through wrinkles and liver spots and just, 1,000 different things. So what I would push is, when we especially think about her hands, like, let me see if I can go to this other angle here. Yeah, here you go. She has the hands of a very young woman here. Okay. Despite the fact she is, in fact, not. And what I mean by that is her veins aren't showing through your skin, especially female skin, which is already can often be somewhat thinner. As people age, their skin gets more thin. So things like veins will show through. Like my advice would be, I don't know how you Google this, but look for images of older women and close-ups of their hands, right? I'm sure it's out there somewhere. I don't want to send you afoul of Googling anything inappropriate, but that sort of thing, because you should be able to see like the blue of the veins. That'd be a great place to put things like liver spots, but working more colors in there, more texture and life into the skin itself. That's where I see your big chance, your big opportunity here for improvement. The feathers themselves, I really love the color transition you've done here. It frames her face in this almost like fiery feathers, which I think is wonderful for the sort of narrative of the piece. At this scale, I would focus a little more on doing things like picking out the center, I don't know what this thing is called, but whatever this center thing is in the feather, as well as some of the individual spines, tines, hairs, whatever these things are, the feather pieces. Like, give me some more hashes and stuff in here, some more slight changes of color, a little more variance. Like right now, this feels way too smooth for, again, what it should be. Like this level of texture and wonderfulness you've achieved with like the hair and the cloth, I want to see in the feathers and more in the skin. That's sort of my main thought. And by the way, I just kind of mentioning the hair offhand, but it looks great. Absolutely wonderful, like silver hair capture there. Has a nice reflectivity to it. I love the deep shadows. I think that's absolutely stellar. So she looks really good. There's one other final thing that I want to comment on, which is the leather head strap that holds the headdress. This is really great. There you go. That was the shot I was looking for. Sorry. I love the texturing you put into here. I love the catch of the yellow light up here in top, on the top of the leather. This is A+. Love everything about it. So really, really good stuff. So there you go. That's my feedback of sort of where I would recommend it. As with always, the answer on a bust is almost always more. Keep going, right? So that would be my feedback. All right. Bartaz, I'm just going to say that's what it is. Been painting for just over a year, and he's got some dragon ogres. He's going to be tackling the big creature caster Drakon soon. Super cool. So any advice and critique is much appreciated. All right. Well, let's take a look here. All right. Yeah, I mean, overall, I'm just going to kind of talk here while I'm scanning through. Overall, these guys are looking nice. Things I really love. Here you go. This will be a great picture to kind of show what we're talking about. Things I really love. Your skin is doing great. You have lots of nice variants in it. I like the green under the arms, back where you got the scales, that soft glaze to connect those. Wonderful. The deep purples and reds you're working into the skin are absolutely great. The muscle definition and separation looks fantastic. Molto bene. This is what I like to see. The steel could use probably a little bit more variance in some places. I understand you're trying to go minimal. You want old, weathered steel. You're not looking for something shiny. You're not looking for huge transitions. I get it. You want some weathered, tamped down steel. I appreciate the micro scratches a lot. I think that looks good. You may want to try to just work in some color. I understand it's not going to rust, but here it seems like you worked in some brown. I'd like to see more of that kind of put around. Think of, instead of shadowing it with just black, give me some more darker shadow colors in some of this metal. I really like this guy's hook sword thing, whatever this is. I want to see more of that brown black used throughout, especially as a shadow tone. Finally, on things like the scales, they're fine. They're covered in a nice way. They have a decent highlight. I think we could go a little bit farther on things like the sort of different texture here in the scales themselves. Give me again some deeper shadows here. Give me the same color definition you're moving through here on this skin to make it so visually interesting. I want to see down here. So working in some other tones into the shadows in the same way. In fact, you could even use light purple glazes here in the green to create the idea that this is unified, right? So that would be another thing you would think about. Final thought's going to be on your basing. It's kind of boring, like it's big rocks, which is cool, but there's not a lot of variation going on there. It's very samey. Give me some more stuff, more edges, more color, more tonal variation. Give me some reds, some greens in there. Give me some little mosses and grasses clinging to the side. Just, something like that. Work more color into it to make it more visually interesting. Right now, it's just kind of a flat hunk of sandy color. Also, black rim your bases. Don't tan rim them. I know people people do this and they think it doesn't matter. It matters, especially when your base itself has this color in it, because now it just looks like this is part of this that you didn't paint or do add any detail to. If this was black rimmed, this base would look way better, just like that, because you would have a hard separation between the world of the miniature and not the world of the miniature. So it's a very minor touch, but black rim your bases. There's almost no reason to ever not black rim a base. All right, Pete. First ever full non-metallic metal project. All right, and a practice piece. Well, let's take a look. I think we know what we're giving feedback on here. It's the NMM. So, let's see. Where's our best shot? Pictures. Oh, there you go. There we go. Okay. Trying to see which going to give me the best angle. I think this is probably going to be the best one. Okay. So, all in all, your gold tones here are nice, and I like where you've placed your highlights. As I mentioned earlier, the key with all metal is you can do anything you want with where the reflection points are. I mean, you got to heed basic shapes, like a sphere acts in a certain way, a cone and acts in a certain way, you know, things like that. But once you're so as long as you're heating that, you can put light reflections almost anywhere. It's just you have to be consistent throughout the whole thing. So here, what I would say is a couple thoughts. I think your biggest challenge is basically just to smooth things out. So like, oh, what does it think is a face there? That's funny. Anyway, the like here on the sword, you're going for this brush steel look with the hashes. Cool with that. I like that. But it still needs to be smoother. Like these little tendrils, this isn't working for me. This kind of feel in here where I can get the sense of the hashes, but they're not so stark, that's working for me, right? So just some more smoothness there. Kind of the same in some places here where we can see that the light isn't quite as, or the blend isn't quite as smooth. It's easier to blend the golds than it is the black to white of the sword. Speaking of black, I need some darker parts in the sword. I need this to come down to deeper shadows in some places, especially here in like the lightning bolt recess under here, you know, up in this area. I just need very small touches of pure black. And then here on the armor, I would be a little more, I would go even a little farther in a few places with your very deep sepia tone. So there's a couple of places you could push that in here. Would be nice to be really dark. Up under here on the bottom of the hand. Push like the reflection up here, or sorry, the shadow right here, like really dark, you know, just in a few more places, push your shadows. In the same way, we need to put up our highlight a little bit. So, and what I mean by that is not add more white into your actual highlights. I think the color you're moving through here is fine. This is the part right here that works the best for me because you have light catches that are the brightest part. And a little more white light catches, like a dot here on the corner of the face, a dot here, dots, you know, like if you go look at Darren Latham's non-metallic metal Stormcast, he did his Lord Celestant, I think it was. He has on his blog, he has a spot where he walks through his technique for it. And one of the big keys is the light catches, is placing those final points of light that really, really sell the effect. So go take a look at that, because I think that would be the final thing that would push it up. As far as like color tones and handling where your light reflections are, you've got a really, really good grasp on this. So it's really just a little bit of refinement at this point to keep pushing to smooth everything and to push your strong reflections up. But all in all, super, super cool piece. All right. True Jess, first time doing yellow, trying to up his skills. He wants to go compete in some event in the future, but this is just for sort of tabletop right now. Okay, cool. Yeah, all in all, this is a nice smooth application of the yellow. The only thing that throws me is here in the middle on this part of the dread, we're using like a warm brown as the shadow, and everywhere else we use like a green tone. I mean, it's shadowed blue, but it's a cold shadow, so the blue combines with the yellow to give it the impression of green. Was that intentional or not? I don't know, so you have to tell me that. The biggest thing I would push you on for a piece like this is you have some hashes and scratches here in the gray. Cool. Give me more of that. More. Right? Like, why is only the gray scratched on this? Did the yellow just never get scratched? Is it a different material? Is this made of diamond? You know what I mean? Like, what's the difference here? So make sure you're consistent with your application of sort of those kinds of weathering elements. And speaking of that, I think that's what I'd love to see is more of those elements brought in here. Could be some streaks, could be some grime, could be some dust and dirt up here, could be minor scratches around the edges where he's punched things. Like this is a big power claw. He assumingly fights things and grabs things that don't want to be crushed and killed. So they probably try to stab his hand back. So like he could have scratches coming back from his fingertips, stuff like that. We could have small catches of brown where water has gathered around the rivets and not shaken off because of capillary action. And so, you know, it's kind of sat there and then evaporated and left like a little ring or something, you know. All that kind of stuff is what I would really recommend. Final note is when you're doing something like freehand like this, and I do love freehanding the Imperial Fists symbol. I've done it a few times myself. One, the middle finger is higher than this finger. Just a small note, neither here nor there. And the thumb is more fills this negative space. What I would say is it needs to be cleaner. Like you can see how this line is here and it's kind of rough. One of the real keys to freehand is not being able to draw super sharply the first time. It's going back and cleaning up. So you go back with your gray color that's around it and, you know, you take this down a little bit, you smooth this edge, you smooth this edge, you smooth this edge, you know, that kind of stuff, right? So just make sure that you go back whenever you're doing work like that and you really smooth everything out. But all in all, this is a really nice piece because your yellow is really well handled. It's super cleanly applied. It looks reflective. Your light placement's really solid. Be careful with the burn effect here on the Gatling gun. You go kind of from like brown into really, really purple really fast. You want this transition to be softer. But all in all, I like a lot of what you're doing here. So my recommendation would be when it comes to vehicles like this, push yourself farther with things like weathering and dirt effects and grime and dust. And there's a lot of different ways you can go. You don't have to do all of them. I'm not asking you to turn this thing into an orky vehicle. It's not what you want, but you know, something that makes it look a little bit more like it lives in the world it's in. The pigment on the feet is exactly the right direction. Like where you're going there is great because it shows that he's walking around this world. Aces, please continue to do that. That is great. Well, I hate it when people are walking across like dusty planetscapes like this and their feet are completely clean. So this is good. Very good. All right. TJ Menzie, first submission to be reviewed, Tau Ghostkeel. He painted for Origins last year. And he said, but he never really got any feedback. He says it was heavily influenced by Angel Giralda's painting style. He's curious as to what steps can be used to push the mini closer to Golden Demon level. P.S. I am painfully aware of the large gap on the gun. Well, number one piece of feedback, fix the large gap on the gun. You're not wrong. Like that kind of stuff is an absolute killer in contests like Golden Demon. Okay, so just getting that out there. Now, as to, you know, kind of where you would want to go. I mean, overall, this is a really good piece. Okay. I like a lot of what you've done here. Here we can see a lot of the weathering and stuff that I'm talking about. One thing, you know, like I like your spots. Don't do scratches like this. So the one thing I'll say here is you've got these scratches. Let's see if I can find it. I don't know if I have another picture. Okay. I don't. You have these scratches where the Ghostkeel's paint has been stripped off and then it's like silver showing. This is a thing that always kind of drives me a little batty. If this is an enameled surface, then it was steel, blank steel underneath. Okay. If the paint got scratched off, you might have a little bit of it where it got polished by whatever scratched it so intensely, but the vast majority of the paint would have just been peeled from the impact hit. And when when an enamel paint is peeled away to reveal steel underneath, it's dull because it wasn't polished chrome underneath, right? When you've got somebody who prepared this, when this thing rolled off the assembly line on the Tau planet or whatever, nobody sat there and polished it to chrome and then painted it, right? It just rolled out as a normal metal color. And then when it gets scratched, you might have a bit of a silver line where like the bullet grazed across it and just the sheer force insta polished it into steel, the same way you'll get sharp silver reflections on, say, like the the cut of a sword, where if it, as it cuts through things, it'll sort of polish accidentally by creating really sharp edges that become light catches, right? So you want to make sure that, like, if you're going to do battle damage like this, make sure it's smaller, more organic, darker. Really cut out the steel. You're better off to just do gray type paint in there. The other thing I will say is you want to focus a lot on, I mean, if you're just talking about Golden Demon in particular, you want to focus a lot on separation of elements and absolute cleanliness. I don't mean like don't damage things. That's fine. You can have stuff that has damage and wear and tear on it. That's super cool. They tend to like that on vehicles. But you want to make sure that like all these panels are nicely separated, that everything's very cleanly applied. There's like a few places where we have some panels where our lines aren't quite as sharp as they could be. So just refinement is the key. Things like these legs look really nice. There's some places up here where some of these front panels, some of these places on the arms up here, this could be a little more sharp, right? Creating more definition inside all these little places, all these little details. Finally, like I like the base fine. I think it's pretty cool. As far as him walking through this muddy swamp, I would probably avoid such a thing if you're gonna, like, I'm answering it like you're really asking about taking this to Golden Demon, and being that there's one in the US next year, hey, there you go. You might very well want to do something like that. I would avoid bases like this where you're covering up part of the model. In general, they want to see the model itself completely available to review. And where he's like in this part where he's like super gunked up and halfway in the water, it's a super cool thing for the gaming table, and people will love that. Judges don't, well, Golden Demon judges probably don't tend to like that as much. Like you can have him walking through some muddy ground and have like pigmenty feet, like I just talked about. That's great. That'll sell. But actually covering part of the model with something where you're like, where everything in the model becomes either submerged, covered, or hidden is generally something you want to avoid. But yeah, I would point out it's not just the gap here. It's also up here, right? And also right here, and also right here, right? So make sure you have all of those. Those need to be gone when you're dealing with something at like highest levels of competition. But really cool piece. I don't know if I said enough about it where like the positives, because like to be very clear, everything I didn't talk about I really love. The rusting, the weathering on the steel, the application of highlights, the blue, the coloration of it, that's all great. Really, really good stuff. Okay. Derek, his first airbrush aided minis, looking for CNC on them as he's about to enter his first competition using the scheme. Specifically, the colors he's used, the gold non-metallic, the light reflections, and the battle damage of the sergeant. Okay. Oof. A lot of different stuff you're asking me about there, Derek. All right. So. Okay. All right. So, first note, let's go through the different elements. We'll talk about the NMM first. It's not NMM. You have yellow and brown, but it's not NMM. You need to go smoother. We need to have an ochre color, not the yellow you're using, and it needs to transition out to white and actually have reflections. So that's number one. Now, it could work just fine as yellow, by the way. It doesn't need to be NMM. Like, I actually don't think it looks bad as it is. I think it looks just fine. It's not metal, but I don't know that that's a problem. It's, so make a choice there. But if you're going to go to metal, it's got to go through an ochre color instead of this yellow you're using, and it's got to go out to white or near white. And not actually white. I say white, and that's being lazy. I shouldn't say that. It's got to go out to like a near ivory, basically. Okay. Now, as to the color of the green, great. Well applied. Good use of the airbrush. I like the shading and the variation. No problems. Well done. So, good stuff there. I enjoy that very much. I want to see the same. However, that just makes the variation between I did this with the airbrush and this gun I painted by hand with a brush really, really starkly contrasting, right? Because this gun is flat And this is really interesting. And these are theoretically the same paint, right? Like this isn't metal compared to this. These are both enamel paint jobs over a different surface. So I need to see the same level of variance here that I'm going to do here. All right. The battle damage feels a bit extreme and inorganic. And what I mean by that is you have a lot of very similarly sized stuff, like this chunk and 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 this chunk. This is a nice scratch. And then you've done a lot of white underneath. I don't mind white underneath depending on the exact tone, but I'll tell you, you'd be better off here with like making this more green. Take a little bit of green yellow and glaze over that white, and boom, you're good on that. I would also wheel back the damage just slightly. Like right now, it's tough to see what's happening here, as in like what caused all this, other than these guys went through a hailstorm, because there's not a lot of narrative to be gleaned. What I mean is it's relatively evenly dispersed around them, and I can't see things that tell me a story. Like I don't see a bullet hole or a series of bullet holes or claw marks, things that I can anchor to that say, here's what happened at that moment. Battle damage is a narrative. It's a story. Every bullet hole, every scratch, every cut is a thing that they experienced that didn't kill them. And you need to sort of think about what did each group, each pattern, each scratch, right? So like around their feet and legs, if you went to this level of battle damage, sure, because they walk around, there's rocks, there'd be spray, they'd be kicking things, they'd be, accidentally hitting their armor against, standing rocks as they're running across a battlefield, or scraping it on barbed wire or whatever, right? Razor wire, whatever. But the top part would assumingly be completely different in the nature of its damage. It should only be things that they're fighting with, knife cuts, bullet holes, that kind of thing. So you can do more like spray damage and micro damage around the bottom, and like claw and straight on damage up top. But either way, I would wheel it back a little bit. I think that's what I will say to you, because it's all very similarly sized, and these guys just have a weird feeling that they've gone through a large amount of debris. Like it looks like they ran through kind of a tornado that was full of small debris, right? And you don't want that feeling. So a little more focus toward the bottom, a little bit less on top, and more variance in size, more narrative behind them. That's my thoughts. I hope that helps, Derek. Good, very good color scheme overall. And I know you said these are your first airbrush aided minis. Wonderful work. For your first time with the airbrush, you're doing great. Your color control there, the amount of highlighting you put into the green and shadows is perfect. Very, very well done. Rasputina. I just got this fig recently. I want to paint this sometime. This will be a fun project I'll do. Okay. So basically this is his first large freehand, and he says he hasn't gone beyond things like simple borders on cloaks and such, been trying for more variation with each color as well, aiming for a better than tabletop standard. Do I keep going, or are there some easy improvements? I really like this fig a lot. This alternate Rasputina model is fantastic. Okay, so freehand first, aces. Dig it, no issue. If I was going to go farther, I would put little snowflakes all over her dress. Like, you want to go the next step, that's the next step. You have this big central snowflake, and then you put tiny little baby snowflakes of like slightly varying size all over her dress or cape or cloak or whatever this is supposed to be. Okay, so that's that. Now, as to quality-wise, so an interesting thing here, her skin isn't in cold. It's just not. Her skin is not in anything. Also, you're overexposed on your lighting. We need to wheel the lighting back way far on our pictures. So way less light. But taking pictures sucks, and I'm no good at it. So I'm the last person that's going to judge you, just saying you're way overexposed. Her skin is just skin tone. That's it. I've got no reds, no blues, no purples, no nothing. It's just skin. And so my best advice would be, if you came to me and said, Vince, this is just supposed to be slightly, I want it above tabletop, which I think you've achieved, by the by. What do I do next? Okay. The first thing I would tell you is I want to see more glazing into the skin. And so cold skin actually has more pink and red in it because as your skin gets cold, your body reacts by forcing more blood into your capillaries to try to keep you warm, right? It pumps more blood near the surface of your skin, hence why your face turns all red in the cold, that sort of thing. So hence, wherever there would be more blood, I would push more red. So places like her under her knee and under her leg here and stuff like that. You want to heed your highlights, but working in some pink red tones in her face, her cheeks should be rosy, that kind of thing. If you want her to also feel like she's in a cold blue winter place, then we need to add slight more blue into the skin tone to cool it out. And actually having your upper skin highlights be blue-white light and your lower mid-tone to reflections go into purple and red to show blood near the surface will give you an amazing variation that very much feels like they're in the cold because you'll sap all the yellow out of it, right? So the sun becomes weak and distant, like a winter's day when the sun is but a distant dream. And all there is the bitter chill of death in the air. Sorry. Anyway, you get the idea, right? So that kind of thing is where I think you want to go. That would be my next step I would do. Overall, I think your color choice is good. Fur looks nice. Snowflake looks great. I dig the heck out of it. You could smooth out the blue a little more with some glazes. Like there's some places where it's kind of rough, but it's not bad. And it isn't the thing I would do next if I was you. Overall, I think she's really cool. So there you go. That's my thoughts. I had painted the other Rasputina, the original one, up for competition a few years back. I really like her. A really fun model. All right, Zab Ritter. Following our advice from last month, and stop right there painting his Kurdos Valentian, waiting for the hobby cheating video on how to paint yellow. Okay, which is coming at some point in time. I did pick up the model I'm going to use to do that video. So, hey, there you go. Unfortunately, I'm in Slanesh-a-thon here, but I promise it will happen. So this month, he's working on his big centerpiece, the Black Coach, trying to give him a magic touch and a little bit of everything, looking for some general advice. Okay, sure. Well, the Black Coach is certainly a really big piece. All right, so first things first that jumps out at me right away, this rock needs more. I need more texture, grit, something, and I need more variation on it, more color. It just feels flat and stuck on there, right? I need more to it than just the sort of squidginess here of this. I need some grit and rocks and stuff like that put in there. That's just the first piece that jumps out at me. Okay. That being said, I like the idea of the thing. I like the tree hanging off the edge. I like the angle to it. Gives a nice home to this thing. Feels like it's leaping off and taking off into the air. Aces. Placement, idea, excellent. We just need to take that big chunk of earth up to the next level. So now let's go through some of the individual elements. Super cool looking army, by the way. Okay. So now let's talk about the individual elements. Our taxi driver here, I think looks great. Nice rusting on the scythe. Green glow is good. Soft blue here. No issues. The horsies could probably use something more. That is to say, like, they're very flat, and this kind of pink shawl you've put them in is so not far from the bone that it all kind of blends together. Like, I had to stare for a minute to see if this was flesh or more bone or like what was going on here. Just color choice wise, it's not, it doesn't have anything really going on. It's neutral, it's near the bone, and it's strange. So my eyes don't know how to resolve it because it's just like I need something else going on. This could be as simple, by the way, as bringing more of this green tone you used here coming off the wheels more up into them. So like if the pink was just maybe on the top and then all this went down into green, yellow, all down in here, I'd probably be like, okay, we're good. So sometimes it's just a matter of the amount of a color you use, right? As far as the chariot itself goes, the hearse or whatever word this thing is, the coach, I think we need more variance in the wood. So a little bit more, like I had mentioned earlier in the video with somebody who was doing some wood, I need a little bit more like deep parts and light parts and just more wood texture. That would be my best thing, I would tell you. Gold looks nice. I like the smoke. I think the smoke works. You may want to trail out a slightly lighter color near the edge, add a little more gray as you get toward the edges, ends of the tendrils. But I like the yellow-green look. I think that sells, especially, by the way, excellent choice to then make that mirror the lantern. So we kind of get the idea that that's the spooky ghost energy is the same up there as it is down there. So I dig that. Yeah, very cool stuff, Zab. Okay, Lorenzo wants to know how we can improve painting flesh tones. This model came out well, but it's far from great. How could he take it to the next level on flesh tones? Not looking for advice on the hair, fortunately enough. Says he doesn't own an airbrush. All serves Slaanesh. Well, Lorenzo, I see your head is in the right place here. Oh, and he's also looking for how to improve large surfaces such as flowing cloaks and robes. Washes make them appear dirty. Yes, they do, because washes are not made for large flat surfaces. Washes are made for things like fur and things that are incredibly heavily textured. Large flat spaces should never be washed because you are just inviting a coffee stain nightmare. Okay, so how do we do better on robes? Let's start there because I can start in reverse. The answer is you need to do one of two things. You are painting in exactly the wrong way here because you're trying to layer and wash a surface that isn't meant for that kind of thing. You need to either go into something like a zenithal and glazes and sort of focus more on glazing soft colors in. That's option one. I have lots of videos on that. Or two, you need to go into wet blending and you need to blend stronger, thicker paints in. Like right now, you're right in the middle ground where you're just and you're using washes, so like everything is going kind of against you there. So go either much thinner or much thicker is the answer, and paint on the miniature. I've got a video coming up soon where I'm going to dive into this more. I've also watch for a couple weeks. You'll see something come up that'll kind of help to elaborate that. But if you go back to a video I did called Fast High Contrast Base Coats, I think is what it was called. I do this on a cloak. And so you'll see what I'm doing there, and that would be my recommendation. Now, the deeper question, skin tones. Oh, aren't they the great challenge of life? So with skin tones, the key is skin is very complicated. It is the most complex thing you can paint. That's why I love painting skin, because it's a challenge. I can spend hours just playing with skin tones on a model. What we need here is more flesh tone. I understand she's a Slaaneshi demon. Still use some kind of flesh tone somewhere. Even if it's just a small amount worked into a highlight. Because it will make it feel immediately more like skin if you have could be a dark flesh worked into the shadows or a Caucasian flesh worked into the highlights. Like you can use any skin tone you want, from black skin tone up to very pale white skin tone. Anything works. It's just you want a little bit of it worked into some of the color somewhere. The second thing I'll say is the inclusion of some kind of red or crimson is what you really need to make a thing feel like skin. Unless you're doing a vampire or something that's dead, in which case you can sap all the red out of it. Or a zombie where it's so rotten that everything has turned green, and even then you want some reds mixed in, frankly. You want some kind of reds in there. And where you would want to put it is in things like here near the leg, here near the upper parts of these torso lines, under here on the bottom of the sort of belly, under the arm, here in the neck, here around the eyes, just stuff like that. If you go look at like the recent Keeper of Secrets that I posted, that's a Slaanesh. That is a demon through and through. That thing is not actually made of flesh. It's made of like evil and excess and pleasure. But I still used some very subtle red tones throughout to give that impression of flesh, right? And then really it's just a lot of like smooth glazing. So if there's no airbrush, the answer is glazing. And it's a lot of back and forth glazing where you glaze a color in and you go back over it with the color right beside it, and then back and forth and back and forth. I want to see you go back, back, back and forth, because in the end, you then create the depth that skin has. Skin is translucent. It's not opaque. We think of skin as opaque. It's not. Hold your skin up to a flashlight. It's translucent. What that means is that light penetrates multiple layers of your skin before stopping, and the reflection you get back from it's actually rather complicated. It's further complicated by the fact that your skin is also kind of satin, so it has a sheen to it. But that's where, because there's lots of subtle tones of blues and pinks and all those sorts of things in skin, and so capturing all those is generally a good way to go. Hope that helps, Lorenzo. It's a great conversion, by the way. Using the Dark Elf Sorceress is as your Herald is Aces. Such a good model. Always ready for a conversion. Okay. Next up, big old Tyranid. Michael says it's been about a year since he got back into this hobby after 10 years. His biggest struggle with this model is getting a smooth blend on the blue carapace. Looking for some helps with getting smoother blends when using a brush. The wings were done with an airbrush with the carapace. I did not use the airbrush on. Also interested in thoughts on the base and trying to cast my own broken ice base, and pretty happy with this one. Okay, let's take a look. Last picture shows the colors better. Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, it's not bad. It's pretty good broken ice base. I would work in some more turquoises or blues under the snow. Give me a little more color variation. It's probably not realistic, but it's more interesting. I mean, I'll tell you right now, yes, this piece, this will be the one we can land on. You know, we need more tonal variation across the whole thing. Like the gray is pretty flat, the blue is pretty flat, you know, and we need to take that up a notch. A lot more variation in those various tones. The teeth are flat. Now, as to how to blend, there are 100 ways you can achieve smoother blends. Blending blue, especially the blue you're using here, is hard because you have white mixed into it as to create your highlight. White is a naturally opaque color. It will show lines very easily. There are many ways to deal with this. It's going to be very hard for me to sit here and say exactly what it is, but I would direct you toward any of my videos on glazing or wet blending or achieving smooth blends, anything like that. Like, go watch all of those videos because you could use any of those techniques. Also, I wouldn't hold back using my airbrush on that blue surface. Like, if you got an airbrush and you're using it on the wings, use it on the carapace. I would use it all over this model after I laid down my colors to add in more shade. Just thin your paint more, push your trigger down less, pull your trigger back less far. It'll help you practice to do that kind of stuff. So, because what you really need is a lot more contrast and variation throughout all of it. Now, as to how it would work, you know, I'd bring some grays in here, some grays in here, or gray purples, like put some purple going into the gray. So because this color is really flat, doesn't feel much like skin. It needs some kind of living color in it. See what I just talked about with flesh, right? So you could use some like purple into a Caucasian skin to create your highlights. That'd be great. As far as the blue goes, you know, you could do stuff like basically lay down some white and then just glaze. You could lay in darker glazes of colors. You know, lots of different options. But I mean, I would explore those videos and give that a shot. One note on the wings is you said you used the airbrush on them. This side is correct. I like how this looks a lot. This is fantastic. They're highlighted and light and very light towards this part of the wing. Good. Aces. The underside is incorrect. Like, this is translucent flesh. If the light is brightest here, if the light is brightest here, it's the brightest here because it's showing through. Right? So you want to make sure that you have it, that you're carrying that through. But moreover, because what you're capturing with wing, when you're creating tonal variation of wings, what you're capturing is how much is the leather of the wing pattern stretched to allow light to pass through. And when it gets near the bone, it's going to be the least stretched, right? Because it's up against the bone. Where the wing has been extended because he's pulling away at a V angle. So naturally, this part is going to be the most stretched, right? And so it would be the thinnest and hence allow the most light through. So that's my thoughts for you, Michael. I hope some of that helps. Okay, Joseph. First post here. Well, welcome. Glad you did. Said he was disconnected from the hobby while moving house and setting up a space, so he's starting with something extra challenging. 75mm figure from Black Sword. Not completely happy with how it ended up, specifically the veins on his head, but then again, he's rarely totally satisfied. Thinking of taking it to a scale modeling show in my area next month. Any thoughts on how he could level it up? All right, well, let's take a look. Okay. All right, so how do you level this up? Let's see. There we go. Got some closer upper pictures. There we go. This will be a nice one to talk about. Okay, so it's a very, very, very busy figure. That's number one. So the first thing I would say is, but it's also a very large scale figure. Sorry, I had to sneeze, and that time I caught it. So my first advice would be, when you get into this scale, you want to create a lot more detail. Like, this figure is insanely busy, but we want to really make sure we have a lot more detail and life in things. In general, blood spatter stuff like this, I don't love it because it's just sort of covers up what could otherwise be visually interesting. But at any rate, if you're going to do this, this is blood soaked into fabric. It is not this color red. Google like blood soaked into fabric. It does not look like this, right? This is red, like red paint. You want deep red because it is soaked into the fabric and it has started to dry almost immediately because it naturally dried by absorbing part of the fabric. It's not a pool of blood. There you go. So that's sort of number one. But the variation needs to be a little higher all kind of around the things. We need more separation between elements. Like here, this chain, I need more going on besides just the silver with like the rusty dust in the middle. This is really good down here. Like, I like your work in the base on this guy. That looks really good. I don't think the face is, like you mentioned, the framing. First of all, on the eyes, we need to like fix up the eyes so they're a little more even. You want to bring the irises out. He has kind of like his irises are too small at this point, so they need to be extended in some way where we take up more of the eye with it. You could leave a little white underneath, but then you need to leave white underneath both, and then you need to only have a U right here instead of the whole ball, that kind of thing. Similarly, what I mentioned before with the flesh and the variation, he has very little flesh showing, but here around his head at the scale of this figure, we want to work a lot of different tones in. You want a lot more variation than what you've got going on here. Okay. We need to see like more yellow into the highlight, purples in the beside the bridge of the nose, more red into the sides of the cheeks, sides of the head there. We could have like perhaps the light dots of some hair or something like that. Like that is say like the where his head would have been shaved or something. Like there's lots of options. Just pick any of that. The gun is part that sticks out to me as being quite flat, right? Like it's this matte gray color and it's kind of similarly gray all the way around it. There's just not much going on. So I would focus on, create some nice variation there. The lenses look really good. I like the heat in the gun. I like the copper. I like all the verdigris you've got going on very minorly, especially where there'd be kind of shadowed or where the water would run. That's all solid. Dig all of that. One thing that jumped out at me, hold on, let me go back to this picture. Two more things that jumped out at me. Leather at this scale needs more. This is a metal pin holding us down, I assume. So that should be metal. But more importantly, this leather is so new and fresh. I need scratches, hashes, dashes, and dots, man. I need something that makes this leather look more alive. Okay. And then finally, the stone. This has got to go. This has got to go. So one of my biggest challenges is this gray stone. It's so flat and just gray. I need a lot more. Stipple colors, mud, rainwater, detritus, dirt, reds, greens, purples, blacks, browns. Give me a lot more. This is stone. This is ruins that have been sitting outside for God knows how many years. If you leave a lawn chair out in the yard for like a summer, it has dirt and dust and grime all over it, right? This has presumably been here for, a century from the looks of it. So it should be like muddy, crusty, ruddy goodness everywhere. Okay. All in all, it's a really cool piece. And I mean, my goodness, did you go the distance on this thing? Because it is so crazy detailed and busy. And you did a good job of like creating a lot of different visual interest. He really feels chaosy. So I like all of that. I like your choices of like the orange for the kind of fire tubes. Those look really good. The heat in the gun looks really good. The red of the lens looks really good. And that complements with the blue really nice. So you've got a good scheme there. We just need to keep up that tonal variation across the piece. All right, Jake English, first-time poster. Hey, Jake. Well, welcome, man. Glad to have you. For this month, he would like some feedback on his Blood Angels Leviathan Dreadnought. It's not quite complete. Still needs to do the base. Fair enough. We won't dig you for that then. His question is on the highlight placement on the non-metallic red effect I have going. Scheme is based off of black and white pre-shade with an airbrush followed by an overall spray of flame red. Okay. Okay. For what it's worth, I know some weathering chip scratches powders could help it. Yes. All right. Always. I would think about a small amount of weathering always. I know you said you like him to be clean, but it happens, right? Some amount of chipping and scratching happens. Even if it's very, very minimal, even if it's just collection around rivets and stains or a few streaks here or there, little minor touches breathe a lot of life. Okay. So I had looked at this guy beforehand because I had been sort of looking him over. And thank you, by the way, for the collected shot. Aces. And you had said, you know, the non-metallic scheme. You don't have a non-metallic scheme going. You have a red scheme going. It's a good scheme. I like it. I don't think you need to change it. It's not non-metallic. If it was non-metallic red, we would need to go a lot higher in the highlights. Like there's a few places where you're going kind of high, like here and here. But for the most part, it's just red. Like you don't go up into the high enough highlight to call it non-metallic. We would need like much, 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 much stronger light reflections. Now, if you want to do that, you can do that. But honestly, I don't think you need to do that. I think it looks just fine. You know, as to like the actual color variance, the tonal variation here, I actually think it's in a pretty good place. You've got good edges. Your red is nice and varied. I don't think that's actually the problem. I think where we've got opportunity is really with the steel, what I can see back here. This is really samey, right? So more control, more brown tones, more deeper shadows. Might want to look into like an oil wash. That kind of thing is where you actually probably need a little more life. What I would actually do with this to make it, like I said, I think you're good on like your highlights. If you wanted to add a little bit more white in some places, you know, okay, you could go up a little bit, like maybe here and here, here and here. If you want to push into that, then push it a little farther. Things like this light line, like that probably doesn't belong because it's not, you haven't put enough light around it to justify it. Like a line like this should be used very, very sparingly, if ever. And if you do something like this, it should be surrounded by darn near white, right? So you could go back in with your airbrush and push it up a little higher and then kind of, you know, give a very light red glaze over top or something like that. But I'm not sure it's necessary. Honestly, I feel like what it needs is, you know, maybe a tiny bit of weathering, but whatever. You don't need to push that. Like you like them clean, have them clean. It's your model. You live in your world. I think just some things like decals or freehand or something like that could be where you want to go. Now, if you really want to push the non-metallic scheme, then let's look at the difference between this arm and this piece. And there we'll find our difference. Here you have a pretty nice high reflection and you have a secondary reflected light point. That's why this arm looks better than here. Because ostensibly what you would need is a slightly brighter white across here, right? And then down into darker, and then this would need to be a reflected light. And all of these edges that you have here would need to heed that same light pattern. So this would need to be lighted. This would need to be lighted across here. This would need to be lighted. All these edges would need to be picked out. The reason I was kind of trying to ward you away from the NMM type of thing is that doing this kind of NMM on a piece is really time consuming to sell the full effect. And you said you were kind of more interested in like a good speed versus quality balance. And I think your scheme looks great. So I don't know that you need to push it there. I think just like the addition of some decals or some freehand or, identifying marks, something like that, plus the lightest touch of weathering and some more life in your metals is actually what you need. I think the red looks aces. So personal taste, I wouldn't change it. So there you go. That's my thoughts for you, Jake. All in all, very cool. Very, very cool Dreadnought. Okay. Daniel Rodriguez with, again, his first end of month review. Wow. All right. Busy week. Busy month, I guess. Sorry. Focused on paying the face and giving a try on NMM on the axe. Says he shouldn't have mixed TMM and NMM, but just received the golden titanium white paint. Yeah, sure. Mix it all you want. Who cares? Like, knock yourself out, man. I combine NMM and TMM all the time. I disregard that rule as a rule. This is your world. You're the creator. Okay. So the axe. Let's talk about that axe. Dat axe. This is probably a nice angle to look at it. You definitely don't have a problem with contrast. In fact, if anything, you might have a little too much. That's a very rare thing to say. But it's actually that your contrast is so smooth. What I mean by that is, I don't mean your blends. Your blends are fine. I mean that like everything is very equal here and there's nothing breaking up the light. The part that looks the best is kind of this because we have this edging around here. Some more hashes or dots or light catches in the metal and probably shrinking your edge lines. Like your white edge lining is good, but it's a little bit thick. It needs to be a little bit thinner, especially on the edge of the axe. Like it almost feels like ice because it's the edge line is so thick. So I would push a little more of your color out there and kind of shrink this edge line a little bit, and that'll probably sell a little more. Right. But all in all, I like the blend. Just like when I say hashes, I don't know where you'd go back and find it. Somewhere in the history of my feed, I painted a version of one of these, and I did an NMM axe as well. But the trick is to have like some small hashes and cuts and dots and stuff in here that break up the evenness of the light pattern. Okay. But overall, I think it looks good. Like you've clearly got the smoothness of the blending down. My other note would just be on sort of light sources, in that where your light source is coming from, like here, this piece is off. I think you actually this should be reversed. Like you followed this very like orderly pattern, which makes sense. You tried to put light next to dark. Unfortunately, I think with here, it would actually be more like in the middle here as opposed to up here. Very small note. It's just something that kind of clicked there. As to the face, yeah, I think the face looks really good. I don't have a huge photo of the face here, but I think it looks really nice. Looks like some good variation in there. I think it's the rest of the skin you could do the same work on. You've got some nice red tones here. I would push that maybe a little bit farther in some places, especially here on the top of the leg. You could glaze in a little more sepia back here, push the highlight up to the knee a little bit, deepen this shadow, especially right here, just a tiny bit. But yeah, overall, it's great. One thing, if you said like the cape looks better in sort of here than it does in the photo, one thing you could do to kind of liven that up a little bit again is to put some hashes, scratches, dashes, and dots here on the edge of the cape where it's been scratched or done something like that. You could add a little dirt or pigment down at the bottom of the cape, just little things like that to add a teeny amount of visual interest. But it's a really cool piece, and I think you did a great job. Hope that all helps. All right, Tebow brings us the big old Eidolon. He says he realized too late the light lines on the base should have been thinner. Tried to paint him fairly quickly, mainly looking for feedback on the color scheme. Okay. Sounds good. Color scheme. The color scheme is fine. All right, thank you very much. No, I mean, seriously, it's good. Like the gold looks good. The placement, in all seriousness, the placement of everything looks fine. I would grab this magenta and try to put it in a couple other places, like hide it more in fish and stuff, or something like that. Like it's very it's very striking, and it's the only example of this color. So like I would try to put it somewhere down here in the base. Yes, the light line should be a lot thinner. If you're going for this underwater reflection thing, you need like these razor thin little lines. They need to be much smaller. They need to be sort of octagon's the wrong word, pentagonal. I don't know, whatever, something like that. But yeah, color wise, it looks good. I love the trident. The trident looks wonderful, man. That's a lot of nice light reflections and points. I think that looks really good. So yeah, I mean, I think scheme wise, it's good. I would push if this is to be gold or something, I would push some of your light up a little farther, like you're doing on the steel over here and here and here. Like we take our highlights to really nice places in all this silver metal, but not as much in the gold metal. Might think about that a little bit. But yeah, my only problem is this is slightly out of balance. It's fairly desaturated, so it's not horrible, but I would still try to place it down here. Like maybe if this fish was this color, I would be much happier instantly with the overall submission. So when you're using pop colors like this on the rest of the army, just, think largely about where else you need to hide it lower on the model. And finally, all right, this is the finished diorama. I had given you some feedback on it last time. It says he won't work on it last month. It says he won't work on it anymore because it's in the hands of his wife. But I'd like to have some professional assessment. Is it good? What'd you do right and wrong? Constructive overall critique. Okay. All right. So here's my first piece of advice for you. Separate. You're taking a picture in direct exposed lighting. Stop that. Give me a diffuse light. Like I need a diffuse uneven light. So that's just neither here nor there, but it's kind of number one. Because that's what's going to kill you with a picture like this. Like we overexpose everything. Look at how deep all these shadows are. It makes it very, 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 very hard to evaluate when I have overexposed direct light on miniatures. Just flat out. Now, that being said, what I can tell here, does it work? Yeah, I think it works. I think you did a good job of bringing some elements around into the others. I wish I had a shot where these little green things weren't in the way so much. But I think it looks good. Yeah, like you had mentioned before, having the minor touches. I really think that you sell the narrative here of the fire versus sort of the death energy or whatever it is. This green versus red, as it were. I like the colors you've chosen for it. Some of this stuff feels a little shiny, like I'm getting reflections. I'm not sure if it's meant to be glossy, like things like that cape. And just stuff that's glossy that I'm not sure it should be glossy, like the fire here. So you may want to make sure you matte varnish stuff like that out. The little bit of OSL here sells better than here. This is a little too abrupt of a change. We need to sort of smooth it out. It should be kind of a soft yellowness, really, is what should be happening all around here, with maybe a bit of orange in this area, right? Like a flame will create a soft yellow-orange light. I like the lava back here. I like the green creeping in through the pigment use and stuff like that. They're kind of intermingling. I think that's good. One of the things I'd like, in general, I think your biggest challenge is sort of tonal variation in certain places, like the skin on the two models, the hair on both of them, like they're kind of flat, that sort of thing. So I think a lot about sort of the previous things I've said during this review on that. But overall, the diorama tells the narrative that I think you're trying to achieve. Watch out for sort of overgloss on things. I think you want to make sure you have a nice controlled amount of gloss, especially when you're painting a lot of very high highlights like you're doing here. You want to let your paint tell the story, not your not the sort of gloss reflections. All right. And that brings us to the end of the review. Go back to me. Hello, everyone. We're back. So this is the part where I would normally ask my co-hosts what their favorite submission was of the month. But of course, I don't have any co-hosts for the second part here, so they don't get to say. Only I get to say. And before I kind of talk about what my favorite is, I just want to say this is a really big month of submissions, the biggest one we've had since we moved over here. Thank you to everybody who's submitting. Quick reminder at the end, like as these continue to grow, it's going to be difficult. So please post what you want our feedback on. I know sometimes we will opine on stuff that we want to have a deep talk about, but like if, you know, I can't do 10 minutes on 90 models. I just can't do it, guys. I will die because that is like all the hours in the day. So I want to make sure that I'm giving you feedback as to what you need. That's my main goal. So one post a month if you need to, if you have something you feel you want critique on, and make sure you tell us in the comments what that critique is. At the same time, thank you to everybody who's posting feedback, offering critiques, answers to questions, all that sort of stuff every day in all the posts that get posted. That is the real value. I've seen the positivity continue to roll in this new community, and I love it. That is what we're all about 100% here. We are about helping everybody take their own next step, no matter where they are. We never compare ourselves against each other, only against our past selves. Okay? So that being said, my pick for this month, it's got to absolutely go to Andrew Wade with that wonderful piece. I know he spent a long time working on it and refining it. From the green hair to the use of the colors to that sassy pig, it's an absolute home run, and I just love it so much, Andrew. It's a really great piece, and thank you for giving us a chance to take a look at it. But there was a lot of great work this month. Thank you to everybody who submitted. If you're interested in joining us in the PmP, you can look down below, and there's a link. Click to join us on Facebook. We would love to have you in the community. But as always, that brings us to the end of another month's review. I very much appreciate you watching this one, and we'll see you next time.